What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto takes his training trip seriously? Harem. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. It was a pleasantly cool morning as two figures trudged along the forest road to Kohona. They walked one behind the other, both with their heads down in deep thought. The figure up in front was a tall, well-built man with a long mane of spiky white hair with a horned Hittite strapped to his forehead. The amount of baggy clothing the man had on and the huge scroll attached to his back disguised the fact that he well passed the prime years of his life. The second, shorter figure behind the older man was a teenage boy with radiant blonde, spiky hair, dressed in a long dark gray cloak that hid most of his well-defined body from view since it draped almost to the ground, had long loose sleeves and a high collar. The exception to this covering was a split that began at the front of the waistline and continued to the bottom of the cloak to give more maneuverability to the wearer. The cloak was mostly dark gray apart from an orange trimming around the edges and an orange kanji for 9 on the back of the cloak between the shoulder blades. The young man also carried an unsheathed katana on his right hip. The blade's color was deep black, an unusual color for a katana. The sword had no visible guard crosspiece and the hilt was quite thin, only slightly thicker than the actual blade. If the hilt had any design, it was hidden by white cloth that was wound tightly the entire way up the hilt. Despite the weapon's odd appearance, it was obviously not just an ornament, as edge of the blade was visibly sharp, gleaming silver in stark contrast to the rest of the blade. The boy's usual bright, cheerful cerulean eyes were clouded as he was currently in deep thought as he plodded along behind his teacher. It had been 4 years since he had been away from his home Kohona. 4 years since he had seen all of his friends and teachers. He wondered how much everyone had changed and how much stronger everyone was now. He smiled brightly as he thought about how incredible eating ramen from his favorite ramen stand, Ichiraku's, would be when he got back. His smile faded as one name manifested itself inside his head, Sasuke. He couldn't believe his battle with Sasuke at the Valley of End happened all those years ago. He could still remember the pain of having Sasuke's Chidori ripping through his chest and also the greater pain of realizing that his best friend was actually trying to kill him. The blonde-haired boy forced the matter of what to do with Sasuke out of his mind for now. There was nothing he could do about it at the moment. His eyes softened as he thought about reuniting with his other teammate when he got back to Kohona. The teenage ninja reverted back to his natural cheerful mood, something that usually happened when he thought about his pink-haired kunoichi teammate. Naruto, the white-haired man called back to his student, breaking him out of his stupor. "We're about 10 minutes away from Kohona, still excited about seeing everyone after 4 years?" the man said, looking back grinning. "You bet, Ero Sennin," said Naruto, giving his trademark grin, despite the tumultuous thoughts running around in his head. "I can't wait to see how much everyone's changed over the years." Jiraiya blanched. "Even after 4 years you still can't manage to treat your teacher with respect," said Jiraiya, shaking his head in mock depression. "Still, I think they'll be more shocked to see how much you've changed. You're definitely not the same brat you used to be," said the toad Sannin. "More than you know, Ero Sennin," chucked Naruto. "I still haven't shown you how much stronger I've become in the last year training with Uncle B." Jiraiya's smile faltered as he thought about the past year. When Jiraiya had taken Naruto away for a long-term training journey, he originally envisioned it taking about 3 years so Naruto would be ready to at least survive being hunted by the Akatsuki. Then near the end of the 3-year stint, Jiraiya was informed by Kohona's Hokage, Tsunade the Slug Sannin, to leave Naruto under the tutelage of Kumo's Jinchuriki, Killer Bee, and come back to Kohona. Naruto was only told the basic reasoning of this decision, so Bee could teach Naruto to control and, if possible, work alongside the Kyuubi to increase his power. However, this was more wishful thinking as no one really expected the Kyuubi to ever be except anyone enough to lend them its power, let alone work alongside someone. However, there was another reason the Hokage wanted Naruto to stay away from civilization, train and be hidden for another year that Naruto didn't know about, and it was that reason that caused Jiraiya's smile to falter. It was well known that the organization Akatsuki was after the Jinchurikis for the tailed beasts that were inside them. Tsunade had known that if Naruto knew that his Jinchuriki friend Gaara was under immediate threat, he would rush to help Gaara. Since Naruto himself was now under constant threat now from the Akatsuki and was not actually powerful or reliable enough after 3 years. Letting Naruto get into a confrontation with the criminal organization was an unacceptable risk. While Naruto knew that the Akatsuki was going after the Jinchurikis eventually, he was told a lie by Jiraiya that he had another year to train before the Akatsuki made their moves, so he would be content to stay training with B and stay out of the way where he couldn't be found and captured. Jiraiya was deeply saddened that he was forced to lie to his favorite student, but he understood the reasoning behind it and agreed it was necessary for Naruto's safety. So Killer Bee had been sent from Kumo to train Naruto in the wilderness to help him communicate and control his tailed beast for a year. Jiraiya had now returned to Naruto 1 year after leaving him with Bee to take him back to Konoha. A lot of things have happened that Naruto doesn't know about. I wonder how he's going to take the news that we lied to him and that we are possibly on the brink of another war, pondered the Toad Sannin sadly. And I'd really hate to be the person that has to break it to him that Gaara has been killed. Jiraiya and Naruto finally reached the huge wooden gates of Konoha after their long journey. Naruto looked up at the monolithic entrance and smiled. "Ah, this brings back some memories," exclaimed Naruto as he surveyed the village from outside the entrance. "Ahaha, you're sounding like an old man, Naruto. You're not old enough to feel nostalgic," laughed Jiraiya. Naruto scowled at his teacher as they walked through into Konoha. "Shut it, you super pervert. At least you got to come back home after 3 years, not 4. Izumo and Kotetsu were the Chunin that were guarding the entrance into Konoha as the bickering teacher and student walked into the village. Izumo was woken out of his lazy stupor as he recognized one of the figures walking past. "Hey Kotetsu, wake up, isn't that Jiraiya-sama the Toad Sannin?" Izumo said to his partner, shaking his shoulder. "You what? Oh crap, yeah it is. But who's the guy walking next to him?" muttered a still drowsy Kotetsu. "I don't know, but his spiky blonde hair is familiar." "Oh my god, is it?" began Izumo. "Yep, it's him," interrupted a grinning Naruto who had overheard Izumo's last sentence as he walked past. "How've you guys been without me running around causing havoc? I'll be honest, it's been a lot more boring since you left," said a smiling Kotetsu. "Who would have thought I'd miss you pulling all your stupid pranks?" "Agreed," said Izumo, who was still slightly shell-shocked at the sudden reappearance of the blonde boy. "You've grown a lot, Naruto, you're not a little brat anymore. Nice sword and get up, by the way." Naruto smiled. "Yeah, I've definitely changed a bit, and thanks. You think I look more mysterious now?" said Naruto as he drew his cloak around him and pulled a scarily accurate expression of a look that a certain S-class Uchiha criminal favors. "Still the same Naruto, I see," chuckled Kotetsu. "It's good to see you haven't changed that much." Yep, I'm still the same lovable prankster I always was, just stronger," said a grinning Naruto, scratching his head. "Well, I better get going. I have to report to Granny. See ya." Naruto waved as he jogged off to catch up with Jiraiya. "Well, that was a surprise," said an amused but bewildered Izumo as he looked on after Naruto as he walked off further into the village. "Yes, but a nice one. He's changed a lot over the years. I wonder how his friends are going to react," said Kotetsu as he smiled. Naruto's head was turning different directions so fast as he looked at everything in the village he looked like he was shaking his head. "Calm down, Gaki, you'll have time to see everything again soon," chuckled Jiraiya. "Plus you don't want to look uncool in front of your new admirers, do you?" as he noticed that quite a few of the girls they were walking past were giving Naruto a thorough looking over and were blushing slightly. "Come on, Ero Sennin, I'm sure they're just curious about me because of my clothes," said Naruto as he scratched the back of his head, embarrassed. Jiraiya guffawed. "I'm sure you haven't really noticed since you've been away from society for nearly 4 years, but you've physically matured a lot, Gaki. I expect you'll be getting quite a bit more female attention from now on. Maybe your beloved, Sakura-chan, will take notice of you now," said Jiraiya slyly as he nudged Naruto with his elbow. Naruto looked away. "Yeah, whatever. She was deeply in love with Sasuke when I left and I'm sure as hell that hasn't changed. Let's just hurry and report to Granny," said Naruto as he picked up his walking pace. Jiraiya noticed his student's sudden change in mood. "I guess some things don't change," sighed Jiraiya under his breath as they approached the Hokage Tower. Tsunade the Slug Sannin, the current Hokage of Konoha, smacked her head on her desk hard enough that any normal person would have been knocked out. She'd come into her office this morning to find Shizune stacking about 10 trees worth of paperwork on her desk. It had been just over an hour of stamping forms and signing papers, and the pile of paperwork hadn't seemed to have diminished at all. Damn that Gaki and Jiraiya for convincing me to take this job, thought Tsunade sourly. I knew I was going to regret it, but that damn Naruto was so convincing. Her eyes softened as she thought of the blonde ninja. She missed him more than she let on to anyone. He brought a certain light to her day that made her life that much more bearable. She didn't realize that most people that knew Naruto felt the same way. She was just about to start another grueling session of paperwork when Shizune burst through her office door out of breath but smiling. "You have visitors, Tsunade-sama," panted Shizune. Why the rush, Shizune? And why are you smiling so much?" asked Tsunade curiously. "Someone's returned from their training trip," said Shizune, still smiling. "I'll go and bring them in now." Returned from a training trip? Whose? Tsunade froze as she realized who the mysterious visitors must be. As she came to this conclusion, Naruto and Jiraiya came into the room, Naruto with a big smile on his face. "Hey Granny, it's been a while," said Naruto cheerfully as he walked in. "Naruto." Tsunade had a trace of tears in her eyes as she walked out from behind her desk to embrace the young man. Naruto accepted the hug, still smiling. He had missed Tsunade as much as he had his friends while he was away. She was a makeshift grandmother despite her appearances as far as he was concerned. Tsunade pulled out of the embrace and held Naruto at arm's length. "Kami, you've grown, Naruto," exclaimed Tsunade, taking in the little boy-turned-man in front of her. "Everyone's going to be in for a shock when they see you." She smirked. Naruto blushed slightly and looked away as Jiraiya laughed. "He already caused quite a stir with the ladies down in the village when we walked, though. To anyone that doesn't know him, he must look quite mysterious." "I'm sure," said Tsunade as smiled and went to sit back down at her desk. Her smile faltered slightly as she thought about having to fill Naruto in with the information he had missed while training, including the information that had been kept secret from him. Tsunade shook her head slightly to dissipate her thoughts. "There's time enough for that later. Nothing major is happening soon, so there's no need to ruin the day for everyone by telling him now. So are you just going to stand there, or do you mind filling me in on what you've been up to for the past 4 years?" Sakura was having a pretty uneventful morning so far. She'd woken up and immediately looked at the picture of the old Team 7 she had on her dresser, just like she did every single morning. She sighed looking at both Naruto and Sasuke, wishing things were simple and happy as they were back then. Instead of gazing at Sasuke like she had for the first few years of her teammates leaving the village, she found her eyes lingering on Naruto. She had thought it was proof of how much she loved Sasuke by how much she missed him when he left, but she realized that now she missed Naruto even more. Sakura still hadn't figured out what this meant. Naruto had always been a constant of life for her. She'd never worried that one day he'd be gone. When she found out that he was leaving for 3 years to train, she'd never thought how much of an impact him being gone would have on her. After about 2 years of Naruto being away, it was like a light had gone out inside her. The only thing that kept her motivated was the fact that she thought Naruto was coming back in 1 more year. When she found out he was staying away for at least another year to train, she broke down crying, in her room of course. She didn't want anyone to think she was weak. Everyone else missed him too. She felt so alone with both of her teammates gone. She didn't feel she had anyone to really talk to about anything with. The incident with Sasuke when her retrieval team tried to take him back to Konoha 2 months ago was still troubling her and had increased her depression. Sakura shook her head violently. She knew thinking back to what had happened when she confronted her crush would only lead to more tears. It had been 4 years now since Naruto had left, and Sakura was still hoping each day that this was the day that he came back. She never would have thought it before, but she missed his goofy smile, his laugh, and his never-back-down attitude. She missed the happiness he brought to the village and to her. Sakura forced herself to block out the depressing thoughts and focus on her duties. She had been burying herself in her training with Tsunade more than usual this last year. Tsunade guessed correctly that this was to take her mind off Naruto. At the moment, Sakura was on her way to see Tsunade so she could pick up some advanced sealing scrolls to store various medicines in for long missions. She knew that with Akatsuki's plans were coming to a head, that there was inevitably going to be fights that Naruto was involved in, and she wanted to make sure that she wouldn't be a burden to him. As she entered the Hokage Tower, she blushed slightly as she realized she actually wanted to impress Naruto when he got back, something she'd never even thought of doing before he left. She shook that line of thinking out of her head before she confused herself and continued making her way to Tsunade's office. I already know most of what happened for the first 3 years. I want to know what training you did over the past year, said Tsunade quite irritably. Sorry Ba-chan, I haven't even told Ero Sennin about what I learned with Uncle B. I guess I'll show everyone some of what I can do after I've met up with everyone again and everything's calmed down a bit, said Naruto apologetically. To be honest, Naruto was quite hesitant about telling anyone just exactly what he could do now, let alone showing them. The fact is that he had gotten stronger. A lot stronger. Naruto, while totally confident in his newfound power, was still quite amazed at just how much he had improved over the last year. He knew that once he demonstrated his strength, everyone, especially Jiraiya, would be wanting an explanation of how the hell he'd done it. Naruto chuckled internally. Now that is going to be an interesting conversation, he thought. Tsunade was just about to retort when Shizune opened the office door and popped her head in, grinning. Another visitor for you, Tsunade-sama, she said, giving Tsunade a wink. Shizune seems to be in a good mood today, commented Naruto dryly. His eyes then widened as he heard a familiar voice that belonged to a familiar body coming through the door. Tsunade-sama, I really need those sealing scrolls now because I'm going. Sakura began as she walked into the room and then stopped dead in her tracks as she saw the people in it. Naruto by this point had turned around to face the door and was staring wide-eyed at his teammate as she came into the office. He had thought she was gorgeous before, but he never imagined how much better looking she could have become over the 4 years he had been away. Her young teenage body she had had when he left had been transformed into a killer body of a young adult. She had gotten taller as well, obviously, but Naruto hadn't expected her to look so grown up. He dragged his eyes away from her uncovered, shapely legs and her well-proportioned chest to her face. He almost immediately lost himself in her amazingly deep jade eyes, which were by now almost popping out of their sockets. Her hair had been kept short like it had been before, and her beautiful face was still the way that he remembered it. His heart actually ached as he was reminded of how much he had missed her as he stared at her older yet incredibly familiar face. Sakura's brain was switching between holy shit heart beating 200 times a second and complete shutdown mode. Oh my god, he's back, was the one phrase repeating itself constantly through her head. Once she had somewhat gotten over her initial shock, she began drinking up everything about his appearance. While his cloak and sword were the first things that caught her eye, she was immediately distracted by how much he had changed physically. He was now at least a head higher than her and his radiant blonde hair was now a bit longer, hanging down halfway to his shoulders and the fringe flopping over his forehead nearly covering his eyebrows. She blushed lightly looking at his tanned face, admitting that her former small, cherubic teammate had grown up to be quite hot. Her eyes stared into his and she had to hold back tears at the sight of those achingly familiar cerulean orbs. He's really back. Naruto now had a bigger smile on his face than he had had in years. He took a step towards Sakura as he started their first conversation in 4 years. Hey Sakura, you. Oof. Naruto had the air knocked out of him as Sakura bowled into his chest, wrapping him up in a tight hug. Naruto was completely shocked as Sakura had never initiated a hug with him before. However, he found that he immensely enjoyed the feeling and definitely wasn't going to complain. Sakura, he began, you were supposed to come back after 3 years, you idiot. Sakura choked out as she buried her face into his shoulder and started crying uncontrollably, releasing all of the emotion she had kept bottled up inside her over the years. Her crying was the result of a mixture of relief, sadness, and joy. She was immediately enveloped in his warmth Naruto seemed to exude constantly. She was surprised by how comfortable he was to hug as she had never hugged him before. She gripped him tighter as she continued to weep into his shoulder. Naruto was still trying to take in that his childhood crush was actually hugging him, and tightly. Naruto had thought she might be a bit glad to see him after all this time, but he never imagined this kind of reaction. He was touched by how much she had obviously missed him, so he decided he could be a bit more honest with her about how he felt as well. He returned the embrace, hoping Sakura couldn't feel how hard his chest was pounding, wrapped her up tight and led close to her ear. I know, I'm sorry. I missed you, Naruto murmured. He felt Sakura nodding into his shoulder as she wasn't up to talking yet, but Naruto understood that she felt the same way. Jiraiya and Tsunade looked at the two friends smiling. At least Sakura will be happy again now, thought Tsunade happily. Kami Sakura grew up quickly, thought Jiraiya while grinning lecherously. Naruto's probably having the time of his life. The two members of Team 7 finally broke the hug, both secretly reluctant to do so, and moved to stand at attention next to each other. Tsunade noticed that Sakura wasn't the only one who was trying subtly to dry their eyes. Well, I'm sure that you two want to catch up and that Naruto wants to go and meet up with everyone again, so why don't you both have the day off from your duties? Tsunade asked, still smiling. That would be great, Granny, you're the best, Naruto said with his trademark thumbs-up pose. Tsunade's eyebrow twitched slightly at Naruto's nickname for her but decided to let it go for now. Still haven't changed that much, Gaki. Go on then, go and find your friends, and I'll be looking forward to seeing what you can do later. Naruto smirked as he left the office with an under-the-breath parting quip. I hope you're ready for it. As Sakura walked out of the Hokage Tower with Naruto, she was unconsciously swinging her arms as she walked and had a slight bounce in her step. She felt better than she had in years and she turned her head slightly to glance at the reason for her happiness. Even though she would be the first to admit that before Naruto left he wasn't exactly the least confident person out there, in fact he was a bit overconfident at times, he looked even surer of himself now. She noticed, however, that there was a slight change in his confidence from 4 years ago and wondered what it was. As they entered the village district she realized what it was. Looking at Naruto she totally believed he could back up his overconfidence. What happened to you over these 4 years, Naruto? Sakura wondered to herself while still gazing at her transformed friend. Naruto looked at Sakura. Well, I guess you'll have a better idea than me of where everyone hangs out now. You know where they would be? Sakura was a bit startled and embarrassed as she thought Naruto had possibly caught her gazing at him. What? Well, we could try some food places. Knowing Choji, he's probably dragged at least one person with him for an early lunch. Sakura said with a grin. Naruto smiled. Looks like Choji hasn't changed then. It was pure luck that this morning was the morning that most of the members of the Rookie 11 that were home in Kahona had chosen to meet up and have brunch. Choji had managed to convince Ino, Tenten, Neji, Lee, Kiba and Hinata to have it at his favorite barbecue joint. After stuffing themselves they had just walked out of the shop and onto the street when Kiba noticed Naruto and Sakura walking down the street towards them. Hey look guys, it's Sakura. Wait, who's the blonde-haired dude she's walking with? Oh shit, is that Naruto? Kiba exclaimed, pointing at the Team 7 members. The whole group rushed forward to get a better look at the two friends approaching them. Kami, I think you're right, Kiba, breathed Ino as she squinted at Naruto. But if it's him, he's definitely grown a bit. Even from a distance Naruto was obviously a head or so taller than Sakura. Hinata almost fainted on the spot seeing that her crush had returned. What in the world am I going to say to him? Hinata thought, panicked. Come on guys, let's go and say hi, it's been a while, said Choji grinning. Naruto and Sakura were having an enjoyable conversation as they walked through the village. Well, more of a one-sided conversation, as Sakura pretty much the only one talking, filling Naruto in on what he had missed while he had been gone. Sakura felt a slight pang in her chest as she remembered the orders that Tsunade had given everyone regarding Naruto. All Naruto's friends, teachers and peers were told not to tell Naruto about any of the events regarding the Akatsuki that had occurred over the last year. Everyone was aware now that Naruto thought the Akatsuki were still waiting to make their move. Tsunade wanted to be the one to tell him at the right time after he returned. Sakura knew that Naruto was going to take the news about Gaara's passing quite hard, especially the fact that he had not been told about it. Sakura was distracted from these thoughts as she noticed the group of friends almost stampeding past everyone on the street as they pushed their way towards Naruto and her. Naruto, look, everyone's coming to see you, Sakura exclaimed. Before Naruto could reply, the group of friends suddenly appeared in front of them. Naruto, is that you? Asked an excited Kiba slightly breathlessly. Naruto turned his head to his fellow ninja and flashed them a trademark grin. The one and only. How've you guys been without me? You've all changed so much. Ino, Tenten and Hinata blushed slightly as they took in Naruto's appearance and saw his handsome face. It was impossible to see most of Naruto's form, his tightly muscled body was hidden from view by his cloak, but he was obviously quite broad-shouldered and muscular. Ino was the most shocked out of the three girls. She had never thought of Naruto as someone who was good-looking or even cute before. She had seen him as a friend and nothing else. She now saw with him grown up and not wearing his stupid orange jumpsuit he was quite a hunk. He's even better looking than Sasuke now, thought Ino in amazement. You've grown up as well, Naruto. You're pretty much the tallest person out of group now, said Choji happily. Yeah, growing up was definitely a good thing for you, said Ino, still looking Naruto up and down as Tenten giggled. Right back at you, Ino, replied Naruto while gazing at Ino appreciatively, particularly her bare midriff and long, uncovered legs. While Naruto only had eyes for Sakura before he left on his training trip, he admitted, to himself, that Ino was neatly as pretty as Sakura. Her beauty had increased tenfold over the time he had been gone, and he was going slightly red as he continued to stare at the voluptuous girl in front of him. Sakura felt a slight twitch in her stomach as she saw the way Naruto was looking at Ino, although she didn't understand why. Why should she care what Naruto thought of other girls? How long have you been back, Naruto-kun? Stuttered a still blushing Hinata. I just got back this morning actually. I met Sakura in the Hoka, began Naruto before a green spandex-wearing young man vaulted over everyone and interrupted him by landing in front of him. Yosh, welcome back, Naruto. You must agree to have a youthful reunion spar with me right now to celebrate your homecoming, pronounced a beaming Lee, giving his nice guy pose. Sure thing, Lee, I see you haven't changed a bit, said a slightly stunned Naruto. Yosh, I am still as youthful as ever, said Lee, still grinning. Neji stepped forward smiling, while Lee's way of asking was a bit unorthodox. I agree with him. I think it would be interesting to see how much you have improved after your training trip. I could use a good sparring session anyway. Knowing Naruto, he probably has at least a few amazing new techniques he wants to show off, chuckled Kiba. Nice sword, by the way. Naruto grinned. Well, I suppose I can humor you guys then. I guess it'd be nice to have a good morning warm-up. Sakura perked up at a thought hit her. Well, we're in luck since Team 7's old training ground is close to where we are now, she said with a smile. Naruto laughed. Well, this is going to bring back some memories. Come on then everyone, let's go now since Lee is so desperate. Naruto was finding it hard to stop smiling. It's amazing how good it feels to see everyone again. Things are just like how they were before I left, he thought happily as the group meandered to the training ground. News of the energetic blonde's arrival had traveled quickly. A certain man with a mask covering the bottom half of his face and a hite covering his left eye had decided to see for himself if the news was just a rumor by scouting the village to see if he could find his old student. Within a few minutes of jumping across rooftops, Kakashi spotted the group of Naruto's friends walking towards the entrance of Training Ground 7. He saw a cloaked, blonde-haired young man in the group walking next to Sakura and smiled under his mask as guessed it could only be one person. Kakashi shushined from the rooftop he was on to appear in front of the walking group. Kakashi noticed that everyone apart from Naruto jumped at his sudden appearance. How's it going, Naruto? Said Kakashi with his trademark eye smile. Naruto stepped forward grinning. I knew you had to show up at some point, Kakashi-sensei. Still haven't taken the mask off? No, not yet, said Kakashi pleasantly. There's quite a few things I want to ask you about, including about how much power you've gained from your training trip, but it looks like you're busy with your friends now, so I'll find you later. You're in luck, Kakashi-sensei, we're just on our way to have a friendly spar. Why don't you come and watch? Naruto said. Kakashi gave another eye smile. That would be great. I'll just quickly grab something to eat and bring it back here to watch, Kakashi replied before disappearing with another shushin. Well, here we are, announced Sakura as the group walked into the training ground. Makes you feel nostalgic, doesn't it, Naruto? This place hasn't changed a bit. Naruto was indeed feeling nostalgic at that moment, looking around at the familiar surroundings. He felt a pang in his chest as he remembered the days that he, Sakura and Sasuke had trained here all just over 4 years ago. His head lowered slightly as he began thinking about Sasuke and what he could be doing now. Sakura noticed Naruto's change in demeanor and immediately understood what he must be thinking about. Okay then, she said quite loudly, trying to brighten Naruto up. Naruto and Lee, are you guys ready to get started? I'm ready anytime, said Naruto, confidently smiling. Yosh, I've waited a long time for this, Naruto. I will show you the results of my endeavors to become stronger," pronounced Lee as he leapt to the middle of the open field. "Make sure not to tire each out too much," said Neji as everyone started moving off to the side of the field to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. "I still want to have a spar with Naruto afterwards." "Actually, me too," piped up Kiba with a grin. "I want to show you what I can do now as well." "Well, if you three all want to fight me, I've got a better idea," replied Naruto casually. "How about you all fight against me at the same time?" There was silence from everyone as their brains took in what Naruto had proposed. At first they thought they had heard him wrong. How could he want to fight Lee, Neji and Kiba at the same time? Did he want to get pummeled to a pulp on his first day back in Konoha? Naruto, I hope you're joking," said Sakura, laughing nervously. "Because otherwise I think that's being a tad overconfident, even for you. Neji, Lee and Kiba have got seriously stronger since you left. Neji is a Junin now. That's good, the stronger you guys are the more fun it'll be," Naruto said, grinning while walking out into the center of field. Neji coughed. "I agree with Sakura, Naruto. 3 versus 1 probably isn't a good idea, you could get seriously hurt." "Who knows, I might last longer than you're expecting," said Naruto, smiling nonchalantly. Naruto could see everyone wasn't convinced from the uncertain looks on their faces. Naruto sighed. "Look guys, if when we spar it looks like I'm in trouble you can stop, okay? Come on, I thought you guys wanted to spar. Not getting scared, are we?" Naruto teased. Kiba started making his way with Neji to join Lee and Naruto in the middle of the field. "Fine Naruto, if this is what you want. Don't blame us if you have to give up just after we start," said Kiba with a grin. Naruto grinned in return. "I guess we'll find out, won't we?" he said, as they all stood ready to fight. Sakura sighed and shook her head exasperatedly as she watched the scene unfold in front of her. "Kami Naruto, it's just like you to pick off way more than you can chew in your first fight back, even if it isn't a real one. I'm probably going to have to spend an hour healing you by the end of this." Kakashi chose that moment to return with 3 dango sticks in his hand. He opted to stay unnoticed in a tree overlooking the field as he didn't want to share his treat. Plus he got a better view from up here. Kakashi's eyes widened as he took in the scene in front of him. It looks like Naruto is going to spar all 3 of them at once. Is he really that sure of himself? He can't be that much of an idiot to think those 3 haven't improved a lot since 4 years ago. What is he up to? Kakashi thought. He was interrupted from his thoughts by the arrival of Jiraiya and Tsunade. Kakashi stared at them with a sweat drop. "This tree is getting kind of crowded," he muttered. Jiraiya chuckled. "Well, we didn't want to miss out on see Konoha's most unpredictable ninja in his first fight back. Even I don't know what he's capable of now. I haven't been with him for the past year," Jiraiya said. "Shush you two, they're about to start," said Tsunade irritably. "I only have an hour before I have to get back to the office." Back down on the field, Sakura, Ino, Tenten and Choji were anxiously waiting for the boys to start their fight. Sakura was slightly tenser than the other. She didn't want Naruto to make a fool out of himself in front of everyone. She looked at Naruto and was slightly shocked. He looked completely relaxed, still subtly exuding complete confidence. Her fists were clenched as she waited for someone to make the first move. Lee, Neji and Kiba adopted fighting stances while Naruto stood calmly with his long-sleeved covered arms hanging loosely by his side. Naruto grinned fiercely at his 3 friends. "Alright, it looks like guys are serious now." He raised a hand beckoning them with a finger, "Come at me." Deep in a huge, hollowed-out cave in an undisclosed location, 8 shadowy, holographic figures were standing on the fingertips of a monolithic statue. One of the figures with a ponytail cursed loudly, "For fuck's sake. Why did we have to have another meeting so soon? It's not like we've captured another Biju yet." A figure that had eyes with ripple patterns in them spoke up. "Quiet Deidara, there is an important reason for this meeting." Deidara thought about retorting, then decided not to as it might not be the best thing for his health. The man with the eyes, who was obviously the leader, spoke up again. "We have captured and sealed every Biju except for the 8 and 9 tails. The 8 tails is still thought to be the hardest to capture as its Jinchuriki resides in Kumo. Invading Kumo will be no small task, therefore the 8 tails will be the last Biju to capture." The other shadowy visages remained quiet as the ripple-eyed man continued. "This means that the 9 tails is now our main target. It has come to our attention that the Jinchuriki has come out of his long-time hiding and is currently traveling to Kahona. Quote, the man turned to two of the figures, which was carrying a giant sword. Kisame and Itachi, you are now no longer in charge of capturing the Nine Tails. Preparations for our plan need to begin as soon as possible. The man's purple, patterned eyes seemed to glow brighter suddenly. For this reason, I will be the one to capture the Nine Tails. Naruto raised a hand beckoning Neji, Lee and Kiba with a finger. Come at me, he shouted with a characteristic grin. Sakura drew in a breath as the boys prepared to attack each other. Be careful, Naruto, she thought. And please don't make a fool out of yourself like you used to, she added hopefully. Kakashi, Jiraiya and Tsunade were also waiting with bated breath for the fight to commence. Jiraiya was actually slightly worried for his student. He knew that when he had left Naruto after 3 years training there was no way Naruto was at a level to take on Neji, Kiba and Lee by himself. Kami, even Kakashi would probably have some serious problems taking them all on at once. I hope you know what you're doing, Naruto, thought Jiraiya worriedly. I didn't spend 3 years of my life training you so you could make yourself look like idiot. The tension on the sidelines and from the field was almost palpable. Then suddenly, as anyone would have expected, Lee made the first move. He exploded from his standing position, hurtling towards Naruto ready to deliver a devastating kick. Lee closed the distance between Naruto and himself in under a second. Konoha Senpu, yelled Lee as he directed his trademark kick at Naruto's head. Naruto's eyes widened imperceptibly as he registered his friend's speed. Looks like he has improved quite a bit, but I wouldn't have expected anything else from Lee, thought Naruto as he watched Lee's foot rocketing towards his head. I guess I'll just dodge their attacks for now, mused Naruto with a grin as he tilted his head to the side quickly to avoid Lee's kick. It'll be fun to see what they can do now. Instead of getting annoyed at the fact that Naruto had dodged his trademark move with seemingly no effort, Lee was thrilled. Naruto, your speed has increased wonderfully, Lee exclaimed as he backed away slightly from Naruto to regain his footing. I think you'll be able to give me a very youthful fight, Lee said in the same high volume while striking his nice guy pose. Naruto's sweat dropped visibly. You really haven't changed at all, have you, Lee? Naruto said with a deadpanned expression. Wrong, I'll show you how much I've changed, yelled Lee as he charged in for another close combat encounter. Lee, not one to hold back, delivered an incredible onslaught of taijutsu on Naruto, who amazingly seemed to be able to dodge every single attack without letting a single one touch him. From the tree's vantage point, Tsunade gasped. Kami, what did you teach him, Jiraiya? He's not even blocking Lee's attacks, he's ducking around every single hit, Tsunade exclaimed. Jiraiya was just as shocked. Hey, I'd love to take the credit for this, but he sure as hell wasn't this good at dodging when I left him a year ago, he said. Kakashi, meanwhile, had noticed something odd that the two Sannin hadn't picked up on yet. What's up with Naruto's chakra? He thought, puzzled. Usually when Naruto fights he billows out his insane chakra like there's not tomorrow. At the moment I can barely feel any coming from him. What's going on? Down on the sidelines, Ino, Sakura, Choji and Tenten were all astounded as Lee was completely unable to land a hit on Naruto. I don't know anyone that can dodge Lee's attacks like that, thought Tenten, wide-eyed. Even Guy Sensei has to block Lee's attacks with his own so he can withstand it. Ino was staring at the blur that was Naruto with a look of admiration. So he doesn't just look amazing, he's gotten way better at fighting as well. I'll have to adjust my top men candidates of Kahona ladder and put him on it, she thought with a devilish smile. Sakura meanwhile had a warm, satisfying feeling creeping up her body. It took her a moment to realize what it was, pride. It looks like you actually do know what you're doing, Naruto, she thought with a smile, still staring at Naruto on the field. No one else might think you can win this, but I do. I believe in you. Back on the field, Lee had leapt back from Naruto panting heavily. Yosh, you really have gotten faster, Naruto, I'm impressed, said Lee, out of breath. Naruto grinned, still looking relaxed and no worse for wear than when the fight started. Thanks, Lee, I can tell you've gotten better as well. The power in your attacks have increased a lot, they would probably hurt a lot if they hit me. Lee grinned back, I'll make sure they hit this time, Naruto, he said as he began to unclip his training weights. No, Lee, you've hogged all the fun so far. It's my turn now, shouted Kiba as bent down on all four legs next to the now giant Akamaru. Naruto blinked as he took in how large Akamaru had gotten over the years and wondered how the hell he didn't notice it before. Giju Ninpo. Shikyaku no Jutsu, yelled Kiba in an animalistic voice. Kiba instantly began to develop wolf-like features, namely long claws in the place of his nails. Akamaru disappeared in a puff of smoke and reappeared as an exact clone of the transformed Kiba. I'm not going to even bother using taijutsu on you after what I just saw, growled Kiba. I'm going with the big guns from the beginning. Gatsuga. Kiba and Akamaru jumped forward at the stationary Naruto, rotating at such blinding speeds that they looked like two-bladed drills. Naruto watched the fast-approaching drills, contemplating his next move. Well, I'm pretty bored of dodging now. Maybe it's time to show off a new technique. I'll have to weaken it quite a bit so I don't hurt anyone too badly. Ba-chan is gonna kill me for messing up the training field as well, oh well. Naruto thought with a wolfish smile. Naruto held out one of his hands to the side, forming a claw. A small ball of condensed, spinning, blue chakra appeared in the middle of his palm. Naruto's chakra continued pouring into the tiny ball until the spinning sphere swelled to the size of Naruto's hand. The chakra inside the sphere was so condensed that it was now almost black in color. Up in the tree, Jiraiya gasped. That attack kind of looks like a Rasengan, but not one I've ever seen before. This must be one of Naruto's new techniques, he said excitedly. Kiba and Akamaru were only a few meters away from Naruto when Naruto decided to act. Raising the rotating black sphere above his head, he shouted, "Omoi Rasengan," and slammed the condensed ball of chakra into the ground in front of him. The effect was immediate and devastating. As soon as the ball of chakra hit the ground, a shockwave was sent through the field, ripping huge chunks of earth away from around the epicenter of the impact and flinging them outwards with incredible force. Deep cracks snaked out from the impact, causing many fissures to form randomly across the training field. The entire area around the training field suffered from the shockwave, causing Ino and Choji to fall over and Jiraiya to nearly fall out of his tree. Kiba and Akamaru, needless to say, were hit by the full force of the wall of earth and wind and were blown away like feathers. Both of them were forced to transform back into their original forms and crash-landed next to the very shocked Lee and Neji, who were just regaining their balance. After a few seconds, everything had calmed down and everyone could see the full effects of Naruto's attack. Aside from the various chunks of recently moved earth all over the place, there was a 10-meter wide crater where Naruto had slammed his attack down. Naruto jumped deftly out of the newly made crater and grinned at his opponents. "How was that?" he asked simply. Everyone, including the spectators, was in varying levels of shock. Jiraiya, Tsunade and Kakashi were shocked that Naruto was able to come up with such a devastating variant of the Rasengan, let alone perform it with one hand. Naruto's friends were looking at him with expressions of awe on their face. Sakura was the first to find her voice. "That was amazing, Naruto," she shouted happily to her teammate. Then her expression changed slightly, "But maybe next time try not to hit us with your attack," she added peevishly. Naruto, who was a bit bewildered that Sakura had just openly praised him, scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Sorry Sakura-chan, I promise it won't happen next time," he said, embarrassed. "What was that move, Naruto?" called out Tenten, voicing the question everyone wanted the answer to. "It was some form of Rasengan, wasn't it?" Naruto looked over at Tenten and smiled. "You're right," he called back. "Omoi Rasengan takes the same form as a normal Rasengan, but I make it by condensing heaps of chakra into the sphere. That makes it incredibly dense and heavy. It takes a bit longer to create than a normal Rasengan and uses up a lot more chakra, but it's quite a powerful attack, as you just saw. Then again, I could have put at least 20 times more chakra into it than I did, so you haven't really seen it at its best yet," lectured Naruto. Tenten and the rest of his friends just gaped at what Naruto had said. They didn't even want to think about the destructive capabilities of Naruto's attack if it could be 20 times stronger than what they had just seen. The occupants of the spectating tree listened to Naruto's description of his attack in awe. If what he said is true about that technique being capable of being 20 times stronger than his last attack, then it's more powerful than any variants of Rasengan that I can use, even in Sage mode," Jiraiya said in a slightly shaky voice. Tsunade nodded her head in amazement. He seems to have improved exponentially over the last year. What the hell happened while he was training? She wondered out loud. Neji and Lee, meanwhile, were quickly formulating a strategy to defeat their orange-haired friend. It's obvious that we can't hold back at all if we want to have a hope of beating him, stated Neji. Lee, I want you to lose your weights and go as fast as you can to try and knock him around a bit. While you're doing that, I'll rush in at any opening and try land a hit on his tenketsu to disable him. Maybe if I get close enough I can hit him with a kaiden. Lee grinned as he removed his weights, creating smaller versions of Naruto's crater where they landed. I'll make sure I hit him this time, I'm not holding back. Lee took a fighting stance. Gate of opening, open, shouted Lee. He was immediately surrounded in waves of green chakra and his skin started darkening. Naruto's eyes widened at the sight of Lee opening the first 4 gates and Neji calling upon his Byakugan blood limit. I guess they've realized they have to go all out against me. Lee's going to be a hell of a lot faster now. I'll have to put a bit of effort in now, I guess, thought Naruto. Naruto felt a stirring within his mind. Why don't we teach these brats what real speed looks like? Said a powerful voice inside Naruto's head. I'm getting tired of watching you play around with these weaklings. Naruto chuckled internally. Calm down, Kyuubi, those are my friends you're talking about. Naruto replied, but I do agree with you about stepping it up a notch. I've noticed Ero Sennin, Ba-chan and Kakashi-sensei are watching this fight. It'll be nice to show off a bit in front of everyone. TCH, just get on with it then. It's not like you have to ask to borrow chakra anymore, the Kyuubi muttered. You're right, but admit it, it's so much easier like this, replied Naruto. Ending the internal conversation, Naruto concentrated his chakra and his eyes began to change color from his usual cerulean blue to a bright orange. Kakashi was the first to notice that Naruto's eye color had changed since he was already studying Naruto with his Sharingan. It's obvious that he's starting a technique or something now because of his change in eye color, but I still can barely feel any chakra coming from him. He obviously still has a lot of chakra, his last attack proved that. So why does it feel like he's only got as much chakra as a mediocre genin? Kakashi thought, perplexed. With Kiba not really hurt but still completely disorientated, Lee and Neji were ready to perform their last all-out assault on Naruto. Naruto's eyes seemed to be slightly glowing bright orange now, something that Neji picked up with the aid of his Byakugan. Curiosity piqued from seeing Naruto's odd chakra. Neji used his blood limit to look at Naruto's chakra system. He gasped at what he saw. Naruto! Neji exclaimed. Your chakra is… I know, Neji. Naruto cut him off, but I'd prefer to tell everyone about it in detail after the fight is over if that's okay? Sure. Neji stuttered, still trying to make sense of what he had seen inside Naruto. Lee had now had enough of waiting and was raring to go. Neji, I'll take the lead, try and find an opening, Lee said before taking off so fast from his standing position it looked to everyone watching that he had teleported away. Almost everyone. Naruto grinned as he saw Lee leave an indentation in the ground where he took off from and rocketed towards him. It's time to let loose a bit, thought Naruto with a foxy grin. Lee smiled as he threw a fist at Naruto's still form. Looks like you can't dodge this one, Naruto, Lee thought victoriously. Suddenly, as Lee's first was a few inches away from Naruto's face, Naruto suddenly vanished and reappeared a few meters away from where he had been a millisecond beforehand. Lee's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. Even with most of his gates opened and all of weights off, he hadn't even seen Naruto when he had dodged his fist. Lee turned his head in shock to Naruto's new position. What was that? I didn't even saw you move, Lee said in a bewildered voice. Naruto was about to reply when suddenly Neji's voice interrupted him. Now Lee, together, shouted Neji from behind Naruto. 8 trigrams 128 palms. He roared as both he and Lee converged on Naruto from front and behind. Even though Lee was a constant blur of motion and Neji's 128 separate thrusts were indistinguishable to the naked eye, they were not nearly fast enough to land a hit. Naruto was moving so fast dodging his 2 opponents that there were multiple after images of him left behind from his movements. Naruto was teleporting to different locations so fast that nobody watching could determine where he actually was. Finally, after about 10 seconds of the inhuman display of speed, Naruto appeared about 10 meters away from Lee and Neji, who were panting heavily with their hands on their knees. On the sidelines everyone was speechless yet again. No one had ever seen speed like was Naruto had just displayed. Everyone in the Kahona 11 was adamant that Lee was the fastest in their group by miles, and Naruto had just put Lee's unhindered speed to shame badly. The spectators in the tree were just as gobsmacked, but for another reason. That speed, began Kakashi. I haven't seen that kind of speed since Minato's flying thunder god jutsu. Finished a wide-eyed Jiraiya. Minato needed to use marked kunai to use that ability though. Naruto just seems to be teleporting constantly, and to wherever he wants to. After this fight I definitely need to have a talk with him. How the hell, can you move so fast, panted Neji. Naruto grinned nonchalantly. It's one of my original and favorite techniques, Shidenho. Like the name says, it allows me to take a step of varying distance in a flash. Naruto explained. I concentrate my chakra everywhere in my body then push out large amounts of chakra from my feet to blast me off to wherever I want to land. The stepping part happens incredibly quickly, that's why it probably looked to you guys like I was teleporting. It does use up huge amounts of chakra though, so I tend not to use it all the time. It was amazing, Naruto, there's no way I could possibly keep up with that kind of speed. Admitted Lee. Lee's eyes widened as Naruto suddenly disappeared. Lee heard a voice from behind him. I think it's time to end this spar then guys, it was fun while it lasted. Said Naruto from behind Lee. Before Lee could react, Naruto drove a fist into Lee's stomach, who careened into Neji who was standing next to him. Both boys landed next Kiba who was still kind of out of it. Seeing the spar end, Sakura, Ino, Tenten, Choji and Hinata rushed out onto the field to check up on Naruto's mildly injured opponents and to congratulate the completely unscathed Naruto. Tenten ran over to Lee and Neji while Hinata ran to check on Kiba. They both gave thumbs up signals to tell everyone that they were okay. The first person to make it to Naruto was Sakura. Naruto, that was amazing, said Sakura as she came up to Naruto, blushing slightly. Inwardly she cursed herself. Why am I blushing at something like this? Is something wrong with me? She thought. Naruto scratched the back of his head and smiled back. Thanks Sakura-chan, that really means a lot hearing you say that. He replied without thinking, instantly freezing as he realized what he had just said unintentionally. Sakura looked up at Naruto confused. What do you mean by that? She asked curiously. Naruto began to feel more stressed than he had during his spar. Well. He began, trying desperately to think of something that sounded plausible to cover up his blunder. Mercifully, he was interrupted by a clapping Jiraiya who was approaching with Kakashi and Tsunade in tow. Well Naruto, you definitely have some explaining to do, like how the hell you improved this much in 1 year. Jiraiya said somewhat proudly. Kakashi coughed slightly. I'd also like to ask you about your chakra Naruto. He said, earning glances of interest from everyone. Why is it that I can only sense low amounts of chakra coming from you, even when you attack? Everyone was looking at Naruto curiously now. Naruto looked down slightly. I guess you noticed then, said Naruto in a low voice. Sakura looked at Naruto quickly, shocked by how serious he had become all of a sudden. She stared at his face, trying to discern what was wrong. Naruto himself was feeling a tumult of emotions. He had known that when he returned to Kahona he would have to at some point tell everyone what had happened to him over the past year. Mainly one event that had changed his life for the better. He did not regret what had happened at all, in fact he was unbelievably happy. But he was still nervous since he didn't know how everyone was going to react to the news. He felt everyone looking at him expectantly. Oh well, he sighed internally. No time like the present. Okay, I guess I might as well tell all you now, you had to find out at some point. Said Naruto as everyone, including Neji, Lee and Kiba, formed a semicircle in front of him, listening attentively. I'm taking it you all know about the Kyuubi inside of me, and that it is incredibly powerful but also incredibly hard to control. He got a wave of nods from his audience. Now Jinchurikis like me are more powerful the more of their Biju's power they borrow. So it stands to reason that if a Jinchuriki can control or work together with their Biju then they are going to become incredibly strong. During the last year, I have been training with a Jinchuriki from Kumo, Killer Bee. He is amazingly strong because he and his Biju work together in perfect harmony and have mutual respect for one another. The purpose of me training with B was to see if I could learn how to control the Kyuubi a little bit better and use its powers easier. There wasn't really much hope of me being able to achieve the same relationship with the Kyuubi that B has with his Biju, the Eight Tails. This is because the Kyuubi is known to be so full of hatred that the thought of it working together with someone was an unrealistic dream. Jiraiya nodded impatiently. He knew everything of what Naruto was telling them already. This was just for the benefit of Naruto's friends. Naruto suddenly smiled. So it was a real shock when 7 months ago the Kyuubi decided to work together with me and lend its power to me. He said, still smiling. Dead silence was the response Naruto was treated to. At first everyone thought Naruto was joking, but after looking at his serious face they had to face the fact that he was telling the truth. So you're telling me, Jiraiya began, that the Kyuubi randomly decided to be nice and lend you its power free of charge? Jiraiya asked incredulously. Not exactly. Naruto replied. He understood that in order for me and him to survive I needed to get stronger. That meant him lending me his powers. Also I made him a promise. Naruto trailed off. What did you promise him, Naruto? Sakura asked gently. Naruto looked up and continued. I promised him that I would do my best to understand and cure his hate. I vowed that I would show him that a life of hatred and revenge is just a shell of an existence. No one deserves to live a life like that with no one willing to help them. Then, to show him I was serious, I did something a little drastic. Tsunade cringed as she tried to imagine what it could have been if even Naruto thought it was drastic. What did you do, Gaki? She asked nervously. Naruto glanced at her with a determined look on his face, unclipped his cloak from around his waist and lifted his shirt up. All the girls present instantly blushed heavily as they saw Naruto's tanned, muscle-bound stomach. They couldn't help it as they started to daydream about Naruto taking off his shirt entirely, and then his pants. Sakura mentally kicked herself. What the hell I am doing, this is Naruto. He's a friend. But as hard as she tried she couldn't shake off the feeling of attraction she was having for Naruto with his shirt half off. The adults, however, had a very different reaction to Naruto lifting his shirt. Although she would never admit it, Tsunade had to hold in a blush when she saw Naruto's abdominals. Kami, if I was just a bit younger, she though wistfully. Then her mood changed completely as she noticed what Jiraiya and Kakashi had noticed straight away. Naruto, the seal for the Kyuubi is gone, she exclaimed with wide eyes. Don't tell me you. Yep, I broke the seal keeping the Kyuubi prisoner. Naruto replied calmly, letting his shirt fall back down. Tsunade gritted her teeth and her hand began to glow slightly green with chakra. What have you done, Uzumaki Naruto, you selfish brat? She yelled as she went to punch him in the head. Tsunade, and indeed everyone else, was incredibly surprised when Naruto caught Tsunade's chakra-infused fist with his bare hand. Naruto looked at her angrily with his bright blue eyes. Don't you mean Namikaze Naruto, Hokage-sama? Naruto said in a quiet voice with a hint of sadness in it. Naruto's friend's eyes widened at the implications of what Naruto had just said, while the adults were in slight shock that Naruto knew about his heritage. Tsunade was also quite hurt that Naruto had called her by her title, something he never does with anyone he cares about. How did you find out about your father, Naruto? Tsunade asked quietly as she pulled her hand away. I met him, Naruto said simply. As he saw the unbelieving faces around him he elaborated. When I tried to unseal the Kyuubi the first time, he appeared. At the time of his death, when he sealed the Kyuubi within me, he sealed a portion of his own chakra within the seal. This meant that when the seal was being removed he would appear for a short amount of time. My mother did the same thing as well. She appeared shortly after Dad did. Jiraiya shook his head in amazement. So Minato and Kushina told you themselves about your heritage? He asked. Yeah, they shouldn't have had to though, replied Naruto with a spark in his eyes. I wasted precious moments with them trying to come to terms with the fact that I actually had parents that loved me and wanted me to live. Naruto looked away, hiding his face, and took a deep breath. When he turned back his eyes were filled with tears. Why didn't you tell me? Yelled Naruto at the forlorn figures of Tsunade, Jiraiya and Kakashi. I know you knew about my parents. Dad told me he taught Kakashi-sensei and that Ero Sennin was his sensei. Why couldn't you have at least told me that I had parents who actually loved me enough to die for me? Naruto was trying desperately to stop his tears from falling, but he was nearly at the point of breaking. Sakura's heart was torn watching Naruto. She had never seen her friend this upset before. She started tearing up herself thinking of Naruto as child, socially ostracized with no one to really want him or care for him. All of Naruto's friends were having similar thoughts and were feeling guilty for not trying to help him more when they were children. You didn't have to tell everyone, just me. I could have kept it a secret. Do you know how much of a difference you could have made if you told me my dad was the fourth Hokage? Choked out Naruto. By this point tears were running freely down Naruto's face. I wasn't as happy as everyone thought I was, you know. If I had known who my parents were and that they had loved me, it wouldn't have been as bad. I probably wouldn't have thought about ending my. He was cut off by Sakura rushing forward and embracing him tightly. Even in his incredibly emotional state, Naruto was still taken aback that Sakura had her arms wrapped around him. Don't say it, Naruto, whispered Sakura, her forehead resting on Naruto's collarbone. You can be upset and angry. You can cry as much as you want and shout as much as you want. I promise I'll be there for you and help you through it as much as I can. But please don't say things like that ever again. Don't even think about it. Sakura gripped Naruto's cloak and clenched her fists as she tried not to cry, but she couldn't help from sobbing slightly. Sakura, Naruto whispered in a hoarse voice. Then his emotions took over completely and he let himself go. He buried his face in Sakura's neck and began to cry uncontrollably. He wasn't just crying because of his parents now, he was crying because of what Sakura had just said to him. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. Sure, people had tried to console him when he was younger, but no one had ever said they would be there for him like she just had. As he feebly attempted to wrap his arms around her for comfort as he continued sobbing, he realized that his feelings for his teammate had not changed at all. He still loved her immensely. For now though, he was too distracted and upset to think about anything like that, and he just clung to her like a lifeline, leaning into her. Sakura felt Naruto starting to go limp and slowly lowered both of them to the ground in a kneeling position, still keeping the embrace strong. Sakura put her hand on the back of Naruto's head and slowly started running her hand through his hair. She whispered senseless calming things to him as uncontrollable sobs racked his body. Even though Sakura felt terrible for Naruto and how he was feeling, she also felt amazing that she was able to help him like this. In the past, it had always been Naruto that had helped her with all of her problems. Now, even though she said what she said and hugged him on instinct, she realized she was helping him now by being there for him. She decided she fully intended to keep the promise of always being there for Naruto when he needs someone. It's a promise of a lifetime, she thought with a smile, remembering the words Naruto said to her all those years ago. The group of friends and adults watched the tender scene unfold with varying emotions. All of them were happy that Naruto had someone's shoulder to cry on, even though a few of the girls were slightly jealous that it wasn't their shoulder. Jiraiya and Kakashi had sorrowful looks on their faces as they considered their decision not tell Naruto about his parents as a child. Tsunade was almost crying herself. Think about how Naruto had pretty much admitted he had had suicidal moments as a child. Neji coughed quietly as to not disturb the Team 7 members on the ground. I think we should leave them alone for now, we can always talk to Naruto later, he muttered under his breath. The rest of the group nodded and gingerly walked away from the training field. Kakashi followed suit and walked off in the other direction. Jiraiya followed him until Kakashi stopped at the edge of the training field. I know we had our reasons for not telling him, Kakashi murmured without turning around. And I know those reasons were good reasons. But I wonder if in the end it was worth it. Kakashi finished his sentence and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Jiraiya looked up at the sky. I'm sorry if I failed you, Minato. I'm such a lousy teacher, he thought as he searched the sky with eyes for something he would never see. The only person remaining on the field watching the oblivious, crying teammates was Tsunade. She looked at the emotionally ravaged blonde-haired boy with pity. I'm so sorry, Naruto, but it's not going to get easier from now on, she thought as she turned on her heel and silently stalked off towards her office. Tomorrow I'll have to tell him about Gaara and the Akatsuki, it can't wait any longer. After about 5 minutes of crying, Naruto had finally settled down and was breathing evenly. Sakura still had him in a hug that she was reluctant to end, which didn't seem to be a problem since Naruto was making no moves to break away. Do you feel a bit better now, Naruto? Sakura asked softly. There was no reply from Naruto. All Sakura could hear from him was his steady breathing. Naruto, she asked again, moving his head backwards so she could look at his face. She grinned slightly as she realized that Naruto had fallen asleep in her arms after his emotional breakdown. Sakura relaxed her grip, which caused Naruto's forehead to rest against her own. Even though Naruto was asleep, Sakura still blushed at their close proximity to each other. She stared at his closed eyes and his slightly open mouth and felt something unknown well up inside of her. On an impulse, she cupped his face with her hands, tilted her head up and kissed him on the forehead. She immediately pulled back, blushing heavily. What the hell? What made me do that? Sakura thought wildly. She relaxed as she looked at Naruto, who was still sound asleep. Thank Kami he didn't wake up. That would have been awkward trying to explain that, she thought, relieved. Sakura decided that as much as she was enjoying holding Naruto, it was becoming a bit uncomfortable. She slowly moved herself into a sitting position, still holding Naruto up, and then lowered Naruto's head into her lap. She twisted Naruto slightly so he was in a comfortable laying position on his back and then began to play his hair again. This situation is nothing like what I envisioned happening today, thought Sakura as she stared at Naruto's now grown-up face. But for some reason it's made me really happy. Sakura smiled, something she had been doing a lot today, and relaxed to enjoy the moment. Within a few minutes Sakura had fallen asleep sitting up, her hands resting on Naruto's chest, with a smile still lingering on her lips. Revelations. Sakura was woken up by the sounds of birds chirping loudly nearby. She sat up groggily and looked up with slitted eyes. The sky was beginning to darken and had a red glow across it, courtesy of the lowering sun on the edge of the horizon. Did I sleep all through the afternoon until sunset? Wondered Sakura, still half asleep. As her body began to come to life, she felt a weight on her lap and looked down, forgetting what it was. As soon as she saw Naruto's golden hair, memories shot back into her head. Naruto coming back to Konoha, Naruto's spar, him getting upset with Jiraiya, Tsunade and Kakashi for not telling him about his parents, and finally herself embracing Naruto and trying to calm him down. Another memory came back to her as well, the one of her kissing Naruto on his forehead while he was asleep. Remembering her actions caused her to blush. Why did I do that? I've only ever felt like doing that sort of thing to Sasuke. It's not like I could like Naruto, that's just stupid. Sakura debated inside her head. For some reason though, at the time, kissing him on the forehead seemed like completely the right thing to do. As Sakura was thinking this, she stole another look down at still asleep friend. As she was completely awake now, her eyes actually registered how Naruto was positioned in her lap, causing most of her body's blood to rush to her face. In his sleep, or Sakura hoped in his sleep, Naruto had turned over onto his side and nuzzled further into Sakura's lap. This caused Naruto's face to become dangerously close to Sakura's more private area. Plus his arms had risen above his, one fully resting on her thigh and the other one was extended behind Sakura on the ground, wrapping around her, giving the impression that Naruto had tried to bring Sakura closer to him in his sleep. Still, thought Sakura, there's no way I'm letting him wake up like this. After training with Jiraiya for 3 years, he probably has enough perverted thoughts running through his head. Sakura started to move backwards while gently shifting Naruto off her lap and onto the ground. As she finally got Naruto of herself and stood up, Naruto's body noticed the warmth it had been enjoying had left, causing him to wake up. Unlike Sakura, who woke up groggily, Naruto shot up instantly awake, something that was the result of undergoing rigorous training in dangerous environments. I'm still at the training ground? Why's it dark? Questioned Naruto out loud, looking around. As he caught sight of Sakura, she looked at him and smiled. You've been asleep since just after your spar, answered Sakura. I fell asleep as well and just woke up a few minutes ago, so I decided to wake you up as well. She decided to leave out the part that Naruto had fallen asleep in her arms and then had been sleeping on her through the afternoon. Ah, Sakura-chan, I was having a really good dream, grumbled Naruto as he stood up. Probably something about a lifetime supply of ramen, right? Asked Sakura with a grin as she watched him get up slowly. Instead of laughing and agreeing with her like Sakura expected, Naruto reddened slightly and turned his head away from her. Yeah, something like that, he answered vaguely. Before Sakura could question his behavior, Naruto had turned back to her with a serious yet happy expression on his face. Sakura, about my outburst about my parents. Naruto began slowly. Sakura walked up to him and gently touched his arm. Naruto, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. I'm fine with everything, don't worry. Sakura said softly. No, that's not it, Naruto replied. He looked up into Sakura's eyes and she was taken aback by the amount of warmth and happiness that his eyes showed. I wanted to say thank you for what you did for me. Naruto blurted out quickly before he lost his nerve. No one has ever done that for me before, saying what you said and holding me like you did. There's never been anyone that cared about me that much in my life. So I just wanted to say thank you, it means more to me than you could imagine. Naruto finished, still looking into Sakura's jade eyes. Sakura herself was lost for words. She had never known Naruto to open up like this to anyone before, let alone be this eloquent and soft. She was lost in his eyes, still trying to formulate a reply when Naruto continued. It makes me really happy to know that you don't want me to be upset, and I want you to know the same goes for you too, said Naruto, suddenly looking serious. I want you to be as happy as possible too, so I promise I will get Sasuke back for you this time. I won't be a failure to you anymore. With those words, Naruto turned around and started walking briskly towards the exit of the training ground. Sakura was rooted to the spot, both in shock of Naruto's seriousness and from the brief look in his eyes she had seen when he reminded her of his 4-year-old promise. He had turned around quickly, hoping that she wouldn't notice, but Sakura had seen a glimpse of the hurt in his eyes when he mentioned making her happy by bringing Sasuke back. By turning around, Naruto had missed something though. When Naruto had told Sakura about what he still wanted to do for her, he expected her to react with happiness and excitement about the chance of her longtime love returning to her. This was another reason he had turned around quickly and walked off. He had no wish to see her happiness regarding Sasuke. He would have been surprised to see that Sakura had had no positive reactions to the news about Sasuke and was actually thinking about her other teammate instead. Leaving the training ground quickly, Naruto opted for jumping across the roofs of houses to get to his apartment quickly. He was wondering whether his apartment would have changed at all over the years when he was interrupted by the Kyuubi's voice inside his head. Why would you tell that girl you would bring back another male for her, Gaki? Asked the Kyuubi in its huge, reverberating voice. I can see your thoughts and feelings, Naruto. Doing this for her will only ruin your own chances with her. Naruto looked down as he traveled across the roofs. It's not that simple. The fact is I don't have a chance with her, no matter how much I love, no matter how much I want to be. She loves Sasuke and there's nothing I can do to change that. The only thing I can do for her is to keep her safe and make her happy. And to make her happy I need to bring back Sasuke. Naruto explained in a dull voice. The Kyuubi snorted. Maybe you wouldn't be so decided if you saw what I saw when you fell asleep, Gaki. Replied the Kyuubi. Naruto flinched in surprise. What do you mean by that? Asked Naruto. There was no reply from the Kyuubi. The demon had obviously decided not to say anymore. Naruto sighed. He knew from experience that when the Kyuubi didn't want to talk, no amount of coaxing or persuasion would make him. Naruto was distracted from his conversation with the Kyuubi by his arrival at the outside his old apartment. Naruto's face twisted as he tried to smile and frown at the same time. Seeing the familiar sight of his apartment brought back nice memories from his childhood, like time spent with the third Hokage. It also brought back painful memories he would prefer to forget, like getting abused physically and mentally by the villagers, searching in bins for scraps of food because shops wouldn't sell to him, and simply just crying alone on his bed where he didn't have to pretend to be happy. Naruto didn't blame the Kyuubi for the treatment he received as a child, and he had told the Kyuubi that a long time ago. Naruto knew it wasn't the fox's fault he was trapped inside Naruto, and it was the villagers' decision to be close-minded and treat Naruto like they did. It was one of the main reasons the Kyuubi had grown to respect Naruto as a person. In turn, Naruto had grown to respect, tolerate and even, on rare occasions, like the Kyuubi over the past year, in which the two had established a relation of mutual respect. Naruto's feelings towards the Kyuubi had changed dramatically since the Kyuubi had told him that on the night that he had attacked Konoha he was being controlled by a man called Uchiha Madara. They still disagreed most of the time about things and they both annoyed each for different reasons, but both the Kyuubi and Naruto were very protective of each other and did not enjoy people saying or doing anything negative to the other. This relationship was the main reason behind the dramatic increase in Naruto's power that he had still not told anyone about yet apart from Killer Bee. Naruto had made it to the front door of his apartment and located a rusty key, which was still in the hidden spot behind a rickety wallboard that he had left it in 4 years ago. Naruto smiled as he remembered how excited he was that day leaving the village to become stronger. Looking back, he realized that he had changed more than he could have ever imagined over 4 years, in power and as a person. He let himself into his apartment slowly, his black battle sandals picking up dust from the heavy layering of the stuff on the floor. As he walked in, he coughed a few times from all the dust floating in the air and looked around. Everything was how he had left it when he had left. Naruto walked over to his dresser and picked up the framed picture of the fully formed Team 7. He thought back to how simple everything was back then, even though it didn't seem it at the time. All I cared about was getting stronger than Sasuke and getting Sakura to notice me. I never thought that in the future I would be getting stronger for the purpose of bringing back Sasuke just to make Sakura happy. Naruto thought sadly. He was interrupted from his thoughts by a loud knock on his door. "I've only been home a minute and I'm getting visitors already," thought Naruto dryly. He opened his door to find a masked Anbu member standing there. "Hokage-sama requires your presence if you are available," informed the Anbu member. "If you are not available now, she would like to see you tomorrow morning at the latest." "Well, I was planning on grabbing some dinner at Ichiraku's, but that can wait, I suppose," mused Naruto. "I'll come now, but I just need to lock up, so tell the Hokage I'll be at her office in under a minute," Naruto replied. Though Naruto couldn't see it, the Anbu's eyebrows were raised. "In under a minute? Surely it will take you longer than that?" the Anbu asked, surprised. Naruto grinned as he took his house key and locked the door to his apartment. "I could get there quicker, but I don't really want to make the effort," chuckled Naruto. The Anbu was a bit stunned. The boy didn't look like he was lying, and only ninjas of Junin or Anbu level were taught Shushin to teleport. "Well, I guess I'll see you there then," replied the masked man in good humor. Naruto smiled. He could see the man didn't believe him. "I'll race you there," said Naruto before he vanished from the spot with the swishing noise usually accompanied by something so fast it cuts the air. The masked Anbu blinked. What the hell? He just disappeared, no hand signs or anything, he thought before making quick hand signs and teleporting to the Hokage's office with a Shushin. After leaving the shocked man behind him, Naruto continued using Shunpo, Flash Step, to tear across the village at an incredible speed, using various roofs as stepping stones. In a matter of seconds he had arrived, slightly breathless, at Tsunade's office window. Naruto saw that the Anbu from his apartment had appeared in the office the same time that he arrived. Naruto waved jauntily through the window at the Anbu member, whose only response was to raise a shocked hand in reply. Tsunade, meanwhile, was a tad perplexed that one of her top-ranking Anbu guards had teleported into her office unannounced and seemed to be waving at her. "Any special reason you're waving at me?" asked Tsunade irritably. "And what did Naruto say about the meeting?" The Anbu just replied by pointing at the window behind Tsunade. The Hokage turned around to the sight of Naruto climbing through her window while trying not to get his sword and cloak caught on the ledge. "You're just like your damn sensei Gaki," grumbled Tsunade. "Would it kill you to use the door like a normal person?" "Well, this way's a lot quicker if you think about it," replied Naruto grinning. "I can see why Ero Sennin does it." Tsunade gave Naruto a frown, but inside she was quite happy. "I'm glad he isn't still upset and angry like earlier today. Maybe he's realized we his lineage from him to protect him. I'm still not going to raise the issue in a hurry though. Kami knows I need him in the best of spirits before telling him about Gaara," Tsunade thought as Naruto made his way to the center of the room. "Well, Naruto, I didn't expect you to want to have a meeting tonight, so we will need to wait a few minutes while the necessary people are summoned," Tsunade said to Naruto. "That's okay, Ba-chan," Naruto replied smiling. "I was about to go and have some dinner at Ichiraku's, but it can wait a while. Besides, I know I didn't really finish my explanation earlier, so it's only fair I tell you now." While Naruto was putting on a smile, inside he was battling a tumult of emotions. He was trying to hold back the anger he was still feeling over not being told who his parents were when he was younger. He convinced himself that everyone had wanted the best for him and had good intentions, but that only lessened the anger a bit. Tsunade and Naruto waited in silence for the necessary people to arrive, preferring to save conversation for the meeting. A few minutes later there was a knock on the office's window. To no one's surprise, it was Jiraiya, smiling goofily while being let in by Tsunade. As Jiraiya made it inside the office, Kakashi appeared suddenly in the middle of the office using Shushin. "Well, everyone is here now," began Tsunade. "I think you all know why you're here," to continue Naruto's explanation of how he achieved his power and his progress with the Kyuubi. "Anyone want to start?" Tsunade asked, looking at the three ninja in front of her. "Well, I guess," Kakashi said, glancing at Naruto. "Naruto, you didn't answer my question before about your lack of chakra. What happened to it?" Kakashi asked. "Yes, I'm curious about that as well," seconded Jiraiya. "I didn't notice it until Kakashi mentioned it before, but your chakra is at a high Genin or low Chunin level." "That's easy enough to answer," replied Naruto. "It's not that I lost my chakra, I'm just suppressing it constantly with the help of a seal on my body." Naruto tugged his collar down and pulled his cloak away from his left shoulder, exposing a complicated-looking seal just above his collarbone. Tsunade looked confused. "Why go to all the trouble of suppressing your chakra like that? It will only hinder you in battle, won't it?" Tsunade questioned. "It won't affect when I fight because I can release the seal whenever I want mentally. If I fight someone that forces me to actually fight seriously, I just release the seal, letting all my chakra out. The exception to this is if I experiencing strong negative emotions like anger. In those situations the seal can lapse momentarily, letting out my chakra unhindered," explained Naruto. "That doesn't explain why you're sealing it in the first place, Gaki," Jiraiya said questioningly. "Well, the truth is that it would be inconvenient to let my chakra flow its full level all the time. My chakra level has grown exponentially over the last year. It has also changed in nature. Letting people experience it could cause problems, especially in Kahona." Jiraiya snorted in derision. "So what, you're saying that your chakra has gotten so large you have to hide it? It sounds like you've just gotten a big head, Gaki." Kakashi was more pragmatic. "So how much of your chakra are you suppressing at the moment, Naruto, and can you adjust how much you do suppress?" "Yep, sure can," answered Naruto, raising a hand to the chakra seal and mentally adjusted how much chakra he was releasing. "Now, as I'm sure you've noticed, I've got the chakra level of a high Junin. To how much I suppress it depends. Right now at high Junin level, I'm suppressing about 99% of my chakra, probably more." Tsunade, Jiraiya and Kakashi's eyes widened comically. How could the boy possibly have so much chakra? Even when he had left 4 years ago for the training trip he had exceptionally large chakra reserves, but this was completely over the top. Kakashi decided to voice the question in all of their minds. "Naruto," he began, still bewildered. "How can you have that much chakra? I've never even heard of anyone that has anywhere near that amount, and that's coming from someone who knew your mother, who had the highest chakra reserves I've ever seen in a person." Naruto smiled and flinched at the same time at the mention of his mother. "Well, it's thanks to my mom and the Kyuubi that I now have such massive chakra reserves," he explained. "I was told by my mom that the Uzumaki bloodline usually had large chakra reserves. It was the main reason they were chosen to be Jinchurikis for the Kyuubi before me. My mother had an exceptionally large amount of chakra even for an Uzumaki, and that seems to have been passed on to me." All three adults were surprised by all the secrets Naruto had been informed of by his parents. What else did Minato and Kushina tell him, wondered Jiraiya worriedly. All of them were silent as they allowed Naruto to continue his explanation. "Now the reason my chakra levels are so much larger than before is thanks to the Kyuubi," Naruto said, turning to Jiraiya. "Ero Sennin, you've seen how Uncle B and the Eight Tails relationship is and how they exist, right?" Naruto asked. Jiraiya nodded as Naruto turned to Kakashi and Tsunade to elaborate. "The Eight Tails completely trusts Uncle B and vice versa. The result of this is that Uncle B can call upon and use the Eight Tails chakra whenever he needs to without any risk to himself." Tsunade nodded. "That kind of relationship is what we were hoping you could attempt to create with the Kyuubi on your training trip. From what you've said about you and the Kyuubi so far, can I assume that you have achieved that sort of relationship with the Kyuubi?" she asked hopefully. Naruto nodded. "I achieved that quite quickly after sorting out some things with the fox." Uncle B was really impressed. However, there was still over half a year of training left, so me and the Kyuubi tried working on ways to become even stronger. Jiraiya's eyes widened. "Are you telling me you've exceeded what Killer B has with his Biju? How could you possibly improve on that?" he asked. Naruto grinned proudly before answering. You're right. I achieved a new level of Biju and Jinchuriki relationship with the Kyuubi. This level is unique to me and would only work for me as far as I know, since I have such a huge amount of chakra by myself. The basic premise is that me and the Kyuubi have completed fused our chakras together, forming one immense chakra reserve. His elders just gaped at him, unable to speak. Naruto just smiled until one of them found their voice. That person turned out to be Kakashi. But Naruto, the Kyuubi is just a creature of hatred and anger. Why would it do such a thing as give up its power to help you become stronger? Kakashi questioned. Naruto's eyes hardened slightly. The Kyuubi is burdened by hatred and anger, that is just how he was created. Humans have never given him a reason to try and control his anger. As you just demonstrated, Kakashi-sensei, people just see him as an uncontrollable creature of destruction because of his past actions without even wanting to try and understand more about him. Naruto suddenly glared at the three adults. It was exactly that kind of thinking that caused everyone in the village to hate me and want me dead when I was younger. I'm not the type of person to want to destroy for revenge, so I was nearly pushed to suicide by that kind of treatment. The Kyuubi is the type of creature to get angry and hate at the slightest provocation. So you can understand how could have reacted to the treatment he received over the years. One by one the adults looked down as they realized their mistake. They had scolded and hated the villagers for treating Naruto as they did, but they had done the exact same thing to the Kyuubi. Especially since they now knew the Kyuubi was being controlled at the time of its attack on Kohona, they actually felt sincerely sorry for the demon fox. Naruto meanwhile was remembering the Kyuubi's words to him before they permanently fused chakras. Naruto had been in the same boat as Kakashi, not believing the Kyuubi would do such a thing. He had asked the Kyuubi why he was willing to do it, and the Kyuubi had closed its eyes and rested its head on its paws inside Naruto's mindscape. Naruto, I always thought I was a being hatred like everyone else did. My purpose of existence seemed to be only to destroy, and I was satisfied with that. Then you changed all that with what you said about taking away my hatred. If someone like you, who lost their parents because of me, grew up alone, was hated passionately by nearly everyone and was nearly pushed to the point of killing yourself, can still want to forgive me and help me, then maybe I owe it to you to try and change and try and help you in return. I think that you are one of the few people in this world that can have access to all of my power and not try to abuse it. I want to change this hateful world that created a creature such as myself, and I think with your heart you have a much better chance at doing it than me. So we will exceed all other Jinchurikis and Bijus and become one superpower that only you control. I have never trusted a person like I have with you, Naruto, don't waste it. Naruto had walked forward, touching the Kyuubi on the snout, looking into its eyes, smiling. I can't change the world by myself, we will do it together. Naruto said sincerely. Just one thing though, even after going through all we have, I still don't know your real name. I'm getting sick of just calling you Kyuubi and Fox. The Kyuubi grinned, not an evil grin for once. I can tell you my name, I suppose. It's probably a good idea since I am going to be fusing myself with you shortly. My name is Kurama. Naruto was pulled back to reality by Tsunade asking him a question. So is the Kyuubi still inside you or is just a part of you now? Tsunade asked. Yes to both of those questions. Naruto replied. The Kyuubi is part of me now and I am a part of it since we own the same chakra now. But he is still an entity in me just like he was before, just not sealed behind bars with a seal. He now exists in a much more pleasant mindscape and has a whole world inside my head to himself. It's really a nice place, I like going there a lot. Naruto said, smiling. Tsunade looked like she was about to speak up, but Jiraiya cut in quickly. Just one more question, Naruto. I can understand the cloak and I think it suits you, as well as the rest of your new getup. But why the odd katana? I never pictured you as a sword person. Jiraiya questioned. Naruto grinned as he pulled his katana smoothly from its strap on his hip and held it horizontally up in front of him with an outstretched arm. This sword was a manifestation, or a gift, from the Kyuubi. This sword allows me to channel the Kyuubis and my power a lot easier, meaning I can perform much more powerful attacks with it. It also can act as amplifier, taking my power to next level. Only with this sword can I achieve my maximum power. Naruto lectured. Everyone was silent for a moment as Tsunade looked questioningly at Jiraiya, who nodded slightly in reply. Naruto saw the action and was about to question it before Tsunade began to talk. Naruto, we are all very happy for and offer our congratulations. You have far surpassed what we thought was possible in your years of training. We do not have to fear for your safety anymore due to your lack of power. Tsunade said in a low voice. Naruto smiled at the praise. He already knew he'd grown immensely powerful and was proud of it, but it was still nice to hear it coming from the people he respected most. Tsunade continued in the same dull voice. It is safe now to reveal to you information that has been held back from you about the Akatsuki and the Jinchuriki. Naruto's smile faltered. What do you mean information I haven't been told about yet? Have the Akatsuki's plans changed? Naruto questioned. No, they haven't. Tsunade continued. It was decided that information about the Akatsuki's actions over the last year would be held a secret from you for your safety. While you were told that the Akatsuki would not begin to act for 4 years, in actual fact they began to move about a year ago, just as your first 3 years of training concluded. Naruto's eyes began to slit in anger. And how was holding that information from me keeping me safe? He asked a low voice. Tsunade met his eyes unflinchingly. If you had found out, for example, that your fellow Jinchuriki were at risk and were being hunted, you probably want to rush off and help them, regardless of the risk of yourself being captured. You being captured is not acceptable, so all of us, including the council, decided to keep this information from you and just tell you the basic reasoning behind the extra year of training. A rule was made that no one was to impart any information with you about the events of the last year, under the risk of strict punishment. This did not deter your friends though, especially Sakura. But they were convinced by the reasoning that not telling you about the other Jinchurikis would keep you safe. Naruto clenched his fists and gritted his teeth in anger and apprehension. So you're telling me something has happened between the Akatsuki and the Jinchuriki apart from B and me? He asked through his teeth. Sued's gaze finally dropped to her desk. She took a deep breath before revealing what would undoubtedly cause Naruto to become the most upset over everything he had been told so far. All the Jinchuriki have been captured and killed for their biju over the past year except you and Killer B. Naruto's eyes widened, too shocked to be angry. All of them? Well, obviously not Gaara, he couldn't have been beaten. Tsunade didn't answer, so Jiraiya spoke up hesitantly. About 7 months ago we received word from the sand that Gaara battled an Akatsuki member over the village, lost and had been taken away. Despite efforts to save him, he was only found after the biju had been extracted from him and was long dead. Naruto's head slowly lowered, not making a noise. Tsunade, Kakashi and Jiraiya worriedly stared at him, trying to see he was reacting. Naruto, we're incredibly sore, began Tsunade in a sympathetic voice. The words she was about to speak were rammed back down her throat as a humongous amount of chakra erupted from Naruto. All 3 adults were forced back, Jiraiya and Kakashi taking a few steps backwards, and Tsunade was pushed backwards from her desk on her chair. All the windows in the office were blown out instantly and shouts of panic could be heard from throughout the Hokage Tower. What the hell is this chakra? Thought Jiraiya in shock as he tried to keep his balance. The chakra is so condensed and powerful that the air has become heavy, it's actually become more difficult to breathe. Jiraiya stared at Naruto, who still had his head lowered, but was now radiating an orange aura around him. This chakra is even more powerful than what I felt from Naruto when he was in his 4-tailed form. It's not the same evil red chakra, but it's not the same pure, blue chakra that Naruto had himself. It's somewhere in between and incredibly powerful. I've only ever experienced this kind of chakra from fully powered up bijus. I can see why he seals up his chakra. Everyone in the entire village is probably feeling it and panicking now. Jiraiya thought in complete bewilderment. Naruto finally regained some control over his emotions and sealed up his chakra again. He looked up at the 3 adults who he trusted with his life with flaring orange eyes. I can understand, began Naruto in a soft, dangerous voice, that you had my best intentions at heart and that you meant to protect me. But if I had been told about Gaara being attacked straight away, there was a chance I could have saved his life, and I will never forgive you for that. The 3 sensei had sad looks on their faces as they stared at Naruto, but Naruto didn't relent and kept going. I'm not an idiot, as much as everyone obviously thinks I am. I'm not going to take on an impossible challenge and throw away my life meaninglessly. I will thank you though. Because of this year's training I have become strong enough so people like you don't have to make my decisions for me like a baby to keep me safe. You and the council have been able to order me to do pretty much anything you want so far and keep anything you want from me, just because I house the Kyuubi. I won't stand for that crap anymore. I am still loyal to this village and will fight to the death to protect everyone in it, including you three. But if I decide something is wrong and want to stop it, or that something should be done and want to do it, I will do it, and nothing you or anyone else says or does is going to stop me anymore. With that parting message, Naruto leapt out of one of the freshly broken windows and into the night, leaving Konoha's elite to wonder what had been lost tonight. While Naruto was having his eventful meeting in the Hokage's office, Sakura was laying on her bed thinking over what Naruto had said and done when he left her over an hour ago. The thing that was most prominently playing over and over again in her mind was the hurt look that had come over Naruto's face when told her he was still going to bring Sasuke back for her. She couldn't figure out why he would be hurt about that though. Didn't he want to bring Sasuke back as well? Then his words hit her. He had said he would do whatever he could to make her happy by bringing Sasuke back. Sakura thought back to when she had approached Naruto crying 4 years ago, begging him to bring Sasuke back for her. She realized that he had had the same hurt-looking face back then as well. It wasn't the fact that he was trying to bring Sasuke back that was hurting him, it was something else. Ugh, he is so confusing. Why can't he just tell me if something's wrong instead of trying to hide it? Sakura thought exasperatedly. Her thoughts were stopped abruptly by the wave of chakra that swept over her, causing her to gasp in shock. She stood up quickly. That's coming from the Hokage tower. But this chakra is insane. Whose is it? Sakura closed her eyes as she concentrated on the chakra, trying to pinpoint whose it was. Her eyes flew open moments later as she found her answer. It's kind of different, but that's definitely Naruto's chakra signature, she thought as she rushed to her wardrobe, pulling out her ninja gear. How does he have such humongous chakra now, and more to the point, why is he releasing so much right now? Something's definitely happened anyway, I have to find him. Sakura thought urgently, unknowingly murmuring the last part out loud. Now fully dressed, Sakura opened her window and without a second thought jumped into the cool night, ready to search for her teammate. I promised I'd be there for him when he needs someone, and it looks like he needs someone now. Hold on, Naruto, thought Sakura, and she leapt across rooftops as fast as she could towards the Hokage tower. After a couple of tense minutes of running full pelt across rooftops, Sakura finally made it to the Hokage tower. She didn't have much hope of finding Naruto in the tower itself, as about 30 seconds beforehand she had felt Naruto's massive chakra die down to its previous unnoticeable and untraceable level and move away from the tower at high speeds. Sakura had decided to still head over to the tower to find out what had happened to make Naruto release so much chakra. Sakura landed, breathing hard, on the tiled ledge that ran alongside the windows of her mentor's office. She noticed immediately that all the windows were broken, but there was no glass on the floor inside the office. She deduced that whatever occurred had blown the windows out from the inside quite forcibly from the lack of glass in her immediate vicinity. Sakura raised her eyes to look around the rest of the office and was met with the sight of her mentor, Jiraiya, and Kakashi looking down with resolute stares. Being careful not to snag herself or her clothes on the jagged glass around the edges of the window, Sakura jumped deftly into the room. She noticed that everything that wasn't very heavy in the room was pushed up against the walls on all sides, like something had pushed everything away from the center of the room. The three mentors lifted their gaze to acknowledge the teenage ninja, but before they could speak, Sakura started firing off rapid questions at them. What happened with Naruto? Where is he now? Did he cause this? What did you do? The incredibly worried Sakura was cut off by Tsunade raising her hand for silence. We told him about what the Akatsuki have done to the rest of the Jinchuriki, including Gaara. Tsunade told Sakura with sadness in her eyes. Tsunade thought of Naruto like a grandson, and she felt appalling having to make him this upset. She knew that it had had to be done for his safety, but that didn't make her feel any better about it. I think that you and the entire village probably know that he didn't take the news well. Tsunade continued, eyeing the messed up room around her. Sakura lowered her gaze. Naruto had returned to Konoha only this morning, bubbly and happy like he always was, and already there was something else upsetting him and making his life harder to cope with. Sakura bit her lip to hold back a tear that had formed. Thinking about Naruto's life so far had had that effect on her recently. All through his life he's had to deal with incredible hardships because of the Kyuubi and this village. His unorthodox meeting with his parents for the first time was ruined by the fact that some of his most trusted people had held back who his parents were from him. Now on his first day back in Konoha in 4 years has been ruined because of more secrets held back from him. I won't keep anything from him anymore. When I find him and have calmed him down, I'll tell him about Sasuke. No matter how many people think I should wait to tell him. Sakura thought. Sakura wiped her eyes quickly and looked up at the melancholy bunch of adults with a new look of determination in her eyes. Okay, I don't need to know anymore right now. I need to find Naruto. Where did he go? She demanded forcefully. It was Jiraiya that responded. I don't know where the hell he's gone. I can't sense him at all. He must have sealed enough of his chakra so people wouldn't be able to find him. I do know that he's angry and upset, so he will probably be in one of his favorite places where he can calm down. Jiraiya answered. Sakura nodded and briskly walked over to the office window, already sifting through her memories for all the places Naruto could have gone to. As Sakura went to jump out the window, her mentor's soft hand on her arm stopped her. Sakura turned her head to see Tsunade with a worried look on her face. Sakura, Naruto was extremely upset and angry when he left just a few minutes ago. I'm not sure going after him now would be the best thing to do. Maybe you should let him calm down a bit and look for him in the morning? Tsunade reasoned gently. Sakura shook her head slowly and removed Tsunade's hand from her arm. I promised Naruto today that I would always be there for him when he needs someone. It sounds like he needs someone now more than ever, and I'm not going to let him down, no matter what the risk. Sakura replied. Without another word, Sakura leapt out of the window, copying the actions of her blonde teammate from a few minutes ago. 15 minutes later, Sakura was becoming quite frustrated. She had been searching for Naruto in all the places she could remember him going since she had left the Hokage Tower to no avail. She paused for a quick breather outside a bustling night bar to think over the options again. She had already checked Naruto's favorite ramen bar, Ichiraku's, that had been her first guess. From there she had gone to his apartment, then to the old Team 7 training ground, and finally ended up searching fruitlessly through the village nightlife. Sakura was getting annoyed with herself. Naruto was supposed to be her teammate and good friend, and she didn't even know him well enough to know where he would go when he wanted to be alone or to think. As she thought this, an idea shot through her as an old memory resurfaced from the time before the third Hokage was killed, before Sasuke and then Naruto left her, before all the trouble started. It was late afternoon after a day of rigorous training for Team 7, and Kakashi had decided to give Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto the rest of the day off. Sakura, of course, made a beeline for Sasuke, begging him to let her take him to eat somewhere. As per usual, Sasuke curtly declined and stalked off without another word, leaving Sakura and Naruto alone in the empty street. Sakura frowned, both in disappointment and anguish of being turned down by her crush yet again, and also from the realization that Naruto was almost certainly going to suggest that she go on a date with him instead of the Teme. Sakura was shocked when she turned around to see Naruto quiet and still for once, staring at the ground with a sad, serious look on his face. Slipping into a soft tone that she didn't use very often with her blonde teammate, Sakura approached Naruto. Naruto, is there something wrong? And what are you going to do with the rest of the day? She asked Naruto inquisitively. Naruto jerked slightly as she spoke to him. He had been completely lost in his thoughts, thinking he was finally coming to the realization that Sakura was indeed in love with Sasuke, and that no matter how much he wished otherwise, he didn't really stand a chance. There was a pause as Naruto's brain properly processed what Sakura had said to him. He turned to face her, his eyes still showing the sadness that he was trying hard to mask. I'm sorry, Sakura, I think I want to spend some time alone for now. I'll see you tomorrow. Naruto replied in a dull voice that Sakura had not heard him use before. As Naruto began to walk off slowly, Sakura called to him. Where are you going? She asked without really knowing why. Naruto didn't seem to find anything odd with the question and replied without hesitation. He wasn't one to keep secrets from his crush. I'll be up on the Hokage mountain, on top of the fourth Hokage's head. He replied without turning around. I feel completely free up there, away from everything and everyone. I go there when I want to think about things. Neither of them met nor spoke to each other for the rest of the day. By the time Team 7 met up in the morning, Naruto was back to his usual loud and obnoxious self, and Sakura was too obsessed with trying to get Sasuke to notice her to remember to ask Naruto what was wrong. Sakura closed her eyes briefly in repentance as she thought back to that day. She couldn't believe she had been so wrapped up in her love for Sasuke that she hadn't even cared enough about her other teammate to want to help him. At least I have a good idea as to where he is now, thought Sakura as she jumped off in the direction of the Hokage monuments. It took Sakura 5 minutes of running and jumping as fast as she could to reach the top of the Hokage mountain. Sakura put her hands on her knees and panted heavily for a few moments, trying to get her breath back. She stood up after her breathing had gone back to somewhere near its normal non-sporadic rhythm and looked around her. She was currently standing on the second Hokage's head, she realized, so she turned in the direction of the fourth's carved-out face and lightly jogged across. As the yellow flashes his face, and Naruto's father's face, Sakura remembered with a jolt, came into view, her hope began to fade. She couldn't see any trace of her upset friend anywhere from where she was standing. Sakura decided to double-check before she gave up and leapt across onto Naruto's father's carving. As she started to traverse the dome of the fourth's head, her spirits soared. Sitting on a makeshift ledge on the left side of the Hokage's face was her blonde teammate. Sakura smiled broadly, despite the situation, and ran towards him. As Sakura neared Naruto, she called out to him, "Naruto!" Naruto turned around to face his approaching teammate. As Sakura reached Naruto and took a proper look at his face, she jerked where she stood. She had expected him to be showing anger and him to shout at her, or to be upset or possibly even be crying. What she was faced with though was a completely emotionless shell of what her blonde friend's former self. His amazingly bright azure eyes were dulled. His face had lost its usual happy glow, now looking a lot paler. As he met her eyes, there was no recognition from him, no twitch of his mouth starting the smile she was used to him wearing when she greeted him, and no mischievous twinkling in his eyes. The two were motionless and silent for a few moments as sadness welled up in Sakura as she realized what must have been revealed to him at last. Naruto finally spoke. "Hi Sakura," he said flatly, turning his gaze back to the night sky over the beautiful sight of Konoha lit up in the darkness. Sakura flinched slightly at the absence of the usual suffix after her name. She didn't know why that hurt her as much as it did. When she was younger, she would have been glad to not have Naruto refer to her in such a familiar way. Now she just wanted for him to change back into the young little boy that had been crushing on her back in Team 7. What? Why'd I want that? Sakura thought irritably. She forced those thoughts out of her mind for now and focused on the reason she came to see Naruto in the first place. "Hey Naruto, do you mind if I sit down with you?" Sakura asked tentatively. Naruto's body didn't give away any reaction as he replied without turning around. "Sure." Sakura didn't hesitate and flopped herself down next Naruto, copying him by dangling her legs over the big drop in front of them. She racked her brain quickly, wondering how to get to the bottom of Naruto's problems without him closing up on her. Naruto meanwhile was mentally snorting at the irony of the situation. Any other day he would have given a year's mission salary to have Sakura sitting with him alone up in this secluded place. However, with what he was dealing with at the moment, he would have preferred it if she had just left him alone to deal with everything himself. Sakura decided to breach the silence between them. "Naruto, from the state of you, I'm guessing you were told about the Akatsuki and the Jinchurikis," she said softly. Sakura stared at Naruto from the corner of her eye as she waited for him to reply. His cloak was parted now at the waist, flowing out on either side of him. She saw that he now wore some sort of battle sandals that seemed to attach to gray-leg, warmer-looking things that traveled up his shins. On closer inspection, she realized that the front part of the chaps were reinforced with something, protecting his shins. She turned her gaze to the top half of his body. His cloak was now zipped up all the way from his waist to his neck, causing his high collar to hide most of his face from the side. His golden, spiky bangs were flowing gently in the soft wind, and Sakura was filled the inexplicable urge to run her hands through them. Before Sakura could berate herself again, Naruto replied, "You knew about it, didn't you? About Gaara and the rest of the Jinchurikis?" Naruto asked in the same flat voice. Sakura lowered her head slightly. "Yes, I did. Everyone did, but we were under orders not to tell you or send you anything about it while you were training." Naruto was silent for a moment before he replied. "Is that all I am to you?" he asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Sakura's head shot up, looking at him. "What did you say?" she asked him quickly. Naruto turned to face her, and now she could see the hurt in his eyes. Am I just weapon to everyone here? News of my friend dying was kept from me so it didn't distract me from becoming stronger. Strong enough to control and use the Kyuubi to fight for the village. The words were tumbling out of Naruto's mouth as he blurted out what he had been asking himself since he found out about Gaara. Sakura's eyes widened in horror as she realized what he was insinuating. Naruto wasn't done yet though. I thought that people were finally starting to recognize me for who I am. I didn't realize everyone still didn't trust me at all. Sakura was about to interrupt until Naruto continued on in a much softer and quieter voice. By the time I left for my training trip I thought that maybe you didn't find me as annoying anymore and that we were actually starting to be proper friends. Do you still not care about me at all, or is it that you see me as the Q? Naruto was cut off by a hand connecting with his face hard enough to knock his head back. His head ringing and cheek burning, Naruto looked back at Sakura in shock to see her hand still raised after slapping him. She was breathing heavily and her face was contorted with a mixture of anger and sadness, the beginnings of tears visible in her eyes. Don't you dare say that! She yelled at him, shocking Naruto yet again. You think everyone didn't want to tell you about Gaara? Even after we were ordered by Tsunade to not tell you anything about what had happened, all of our group decided we were still going to find a way to tell you whatever the repercussions. The only reason we didn't is because Kakashi and Tsunade convinced us that it was only done for your safety and that allowing you to find out about Gaara could get you killed. Naruto was wide-eyed watching Sakura go off at him. She had yelled and hit him a lot of times before, but this was different. He could tell she was incredibly upset and hurt by what he had said in his moodiness, and he instantly felt terrible that he had done that to her. Sakura breathed in deeply to calm herself, bunching her fist on her knees now that she was kneeling in front of Naruto. She looked up at him again, her eyes now losing their anger and being replaced by more sadness. And don't you dare say I don't care about you. She continued, now in a softer but still hurt voice. I thought I made it clear you're an important friend to me earlier today. Naruto flinched as he remembered how she had cared for him when he had his embarrassing mini breakdown. How could he have accused her of not caring at all? That couldn't have been an act, could it? You have no idea how much I missed you while you were gone, especially this last year. Sakura continued, even more so after what happened with Sasuke. Sakura stopped as she realized what she had just been about to say. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly at her words. Something else everyone hasn't been telling me? He asked in a colder voice. Sakura shook her head vehemently. No, what I'm about to tell you only happened only 2 months ago, and I told everyone that I wanted to be the one to tell you. I wanted to tell you as soon as possible, and this has been the first appropriate time to do so. Naruto's anger was completely erased by her explanation, now replaced by concern as he saw his teammate looked upset about whatever happened to do with Sasuke. It's okay, I understand, replied Naruto, turning to sit cross-legged facing Sakura. What happened with Sasuke? He asked worriedly. Sakura took a deep breath before retelling the events to Naruto. She knew that he wasn't going to take it well at all. Well, about 3 months ago we received the news that Sasuke had killed Orochimaru. Naruto's eyes widened again at this. So what's he doing still? Sakura held up her hand to silence him. Let me finish, wait until I'm done to comment, she replied. Naruto nodded and settled back down to listen. So after we got word of Orochimaru's death, Jiraiya used his spy network to try and find Sasuke's location. About 3 weeks later, Jiraiya was told that Sasuke was in an area quite near the Fire Country border. A retrieval team was immediately put together, which included Kakashi-sensei, 2 Anbu members, me, Lee and Neji. After a few days of traveling and following Sasuke's scent with Pakun, Kakashi's summon, we found Sasuke and confronted him. Sakura broke off looking down. Naruto reached across without really thinking what he was doing and put his hand on Sakura's knee. She looked up at him in surprise. Even by just gently touching her leg she could feel his heat starting to flow through her. Instead of becoming embarrassed by the slight contact, she drew confidence from it and continued. Just by looking at him I knew that he had changed for the worse. His eyes were dark and haunting and I didn't feel any warmth from him at all. He looked into my eyes and I saw unbelievable hatred in them. We asked him about Orochimaru and told him to come back to Konoha with us. He laughed at us and told us he had no wish to come back to our weak and pathetic village. Sakura paused to look at Naruto's reaction. His hand that had been on her knee was now bunched into a fist on the ground and his eyes had filled with sadness yet again. Naruto had hoped that after killing Orochimaru that Sasuke would have changed and see the mistakes he had made. This was obviously not the case. Sakura readied herself. This was the part of the story that would be the hardest for her to tell and probably the worst for Naruto to hear. Nevertheless, she continued. After he shot down Kakashi's proposals about coming back with us, I approached him by myself. Sakura said softly. I told him how much I had missed him and wanted him back. I said that I would make everything okay for him and that I loved him. Naruto tried to hide it, but Sakura noticed that he jerked slightly and a hurt look flashed across his face as she relayed what she had said to Sasuke. It was the second time she had seen him make that face today. The first being when he had promised her he would bring back Sasuke for her happiness. She would have asked him about it but she had to finish the story before she lost her nerve. When I confessed to him he laughed, saying that he didn't care about me or you or anyone for Konoha anymore. That he had cut his bonds with everyone. With that he disappeared and reappeared in front of me, thrusting his new sword into my chest. It was only Kakashi-sensei's reactions that saved me. Sakura reached up and pulled her shirt down slightly from her shoulder, revealing a 3 cm scar just below her collarbone. Kakashi-sensei just managed to jump and knock the blade away from piercing my heart a moment before it would have. In the shock of me being stabbed through by Sasuke, Sasuke managed to get away from our group. That was the last we saw of him since we came back to Konoha because of my injury. Sakura finished looking down at the ground, shaking slightly as she remembered the moment that Sasuke proved he had broken the bond that they had had permanently. Sakura looked up quickly as she felt Naruto's chakra begin to fluctuate. The air around Naruto started to glow orange and both his hands were bunched into fists, tightened so much that his hands were beginning to go white. I almost lost her, Naruto thought in shock and anger. And it was Sasuke that almost killed her. I never thought he would go this far. I can't believe this. Sakura saw that Naruto was letting his emotions get the better of him just like what had happened in the Hokage Tower. She quickly did the only thing she could think of doing, shuffling forward and cupping his face with one hand, raising his face to look her in the eyes. As Naruto looked into Sakura's jade eyes he immediately calmed down, his chakra levels settling down into being held back by his seal. As he calmed down he began to blush as he noticed his proximity to the beautiful girl in front of him. Sakura didn't seem to notice as she spoke to him. Don't get upset Naruto, I'm fine now and I've gotten over it a bit I think. Sakura said, trying to console him. Naruto studied her face and saw that she was trying to put on a brave face for him. He growled slightly and surprised Sakura by drawing her into a tight hug. As she was wrapped up by Naruto's arms, Sakura immediately felt calmer and inexplicably safe. No, it's not okay. Naruto said, resting his chin on top of Sakura's head. I know what it's like to be on the end of a killing blow by someone who is close to you. It's not something you just get over quickly. It happened to me 4 years ago and I'm still not totally over it. Naruto tightened his grip on Sakura slightly. I'm so sorry you had to go through something like that. I promise I won't let anything like that happen to you again. Naruto said softly. Whether it was all the emotions from the Sasuke incident she had kept bottled up, or the reaction from what Naruto had just said to her, Sakura's resolve to stay strong and keep herself in check broke. She melted into Naruto, clasping his cloak with both her hands and pulled herself into him. She smothered her sobs in his chest and managed to soak his chest within moments. Naruto, meanwhile, was emotionally confused. He was still incredibly angry and upset about Sakura nearly being killed by Sasuke, but he was also happier than he could ever remember being at having the girl he loved nestling into him like she was now. Even though he could barely believe he wasn't dreaming, comforting the girl in his arms came first. He moved one hand to rub her back and used the other to run through her pink hair, whispering calming words to her like she had done for him. Though she was still crying, Sakura was fully aware of Naruto's actions. Although she never, ever would have even considered letting Naruto think he could be like this with her before, she completely welcomed it now. His warmth had enveloped her entire body and she could already feel herself calming down because of it. She stopped crying but didn't take her face away from his chest, not really wanting him to stop. His hands on her back and in her hair felt amazing and she tightened her grip on him. Not really considering what he was doing, Only thinking about comforting his friend, Naruto tilted his head down and lightly kissed Sakura on the top of her head. He immediately pulled back, blushing heavily at what he had just done, wondering if he could think of a way to get away before Sakura punched him into the middle of next week. Sakura was enjoying herself immensely until she felt Naruto's soft breath and then his lips on her head. Although Naruto couldn't see it, Sakura's face became redder than Gaara's hair as her brain computed what Naruto had just done. Instead of the indignation she expected to feel, a warm feeling came over her body and she moaned slightly in pleasure at the contact. She began to feel something that could only be described as lust, and she knew it. However, before she could become shocked about that, she felt Naruto stiffen and loosen his grip on her. She deduced this was because he had realized what he had just done and was panicking. Stupid Naruto, always doing things without thinking, she thought with a grin. She felt him start to pull away from her by moving backwards, but she wasn't about to let that happen. She moved off her knees and wrapped her arms around Naruto's stomach, curling up in between his spread legs. She rested her head sideways against his torso and closed her eyes. "Don't move, you're too comfortable," she murmured at him, her voice slightly muffled by his cloak. Naruto smiled and blushed at the same time. He had no problem whatsoever not moving now that he knew Sakura didn't have a problem with it. He relaxed, bringing his outstretched legs in a bit to encircle Sakura's form and pulled Sakura closer to him with his arms. His heart pounded as he felt her respond by snuggling up into him. He tried to calm himself before he got too excited. "It's not like she feels like I do," Naruto convinced himself mentally. "She's just upset and needs someone to comfort her, that's all." The two teammates remained in this position for about 15 minutes, by which point Sakura had drifted off to sleep and Naruto was becoming quite uncomfortable on the rocky ground, despite his happiness of how the situation turned out. Naruto slowly disentangled himself from Sakura while still keeping her upright with his hand. He knelt next to her, gently prodding her shoulder to see if she was really asleep or not. When she didn't stir, he sighed. "As much as I've enjoyed this, it's getting kind of late and we can't just fall asleep without anyone knowing where we are," he said softly to the gently snoring girl. Naruto gently slid his arms under her sleeping form, picking her up bridal style. As he stood up and looked at her, he smiled sadly. "I'll probably never be able to hold her like this again. I wish it could have lasted longer," he thought before gripping Sakura securely and by using chakra concentrated in his feet, jumped explosively off the fourth's head and into space. If Sakura had have woken up at this point, she probably would have screamed bloody murder and then had a heart attack, as they were both plummeting down towards the village below them. Luckily Naruto knew what he was doing and his brow furrowed as he concentrated on another skill he had learned on his training trip. He unsealed a small portion of chakra from his seal, concentrating on putting as much chakra as he could into his feet. When he was about 50 meters away from the roof of a high building, he pushed the chakra outwards from his feet, pushing against the air below him. The outcome of this was Naruto's plunge downwards slowing considerably as the chakra was trying to push him back up into the air. Naruto landed softly on the rooftop, hardly causing a noticeable bump for him or his passenger. Unfortunately, Sakura was a light sleeper and the bump, as small as it was enough to wake her from her nap. She groggily opened her eyes to slits, gazing up to see Naruto's handsome face looking forward, not yet noticing she had woken. Sakura decided to keep it that way as she felt herself whooshing through the air in Naruto's arms. She blushed slightly as she realized she must have fallen asleep up on the mountain and Naruto was carrying her home. Sakura kept her eyes open as unnoticeable slits and gazed at the young man carrying her. Her brain was still half asleep as she was still immensely comfortable, even flying through the air. Maybe it was because of her drowsy state that as she continued to gaze at her carrier, her body began to have a reaction. "He's actually unbelievably hot," she thought, trying not to let her blush show. "Even Sasuke wasn't this good looking when I saw him a few months ago, and I thought he was amazing." Her mind rocked at the revelation that she had just admitted that someone was hotter than Sasuke. And on top of that, that person was Naruto. Sakura mentally shook her head. "I've got to think this through in the morning, I'm just going to enjoy the moment," she thought, closing her eyes and relaxing as Naruto glided through the air with her. To Sakura's disappointment, they arrived at her house a few minutes later. Naruto thought for a moment at her doorstep and decided it would be nicer to not have to wake Sakura up. So he jumped deftly up onto Sakura's wide windowsill on the second floor and used a simple skill of manipulating chakra to unlock her window. Checking quickly that no one was around to think he was breaking into a house with an unconscious girl in his arms, Naruto pushed through the curtains and stepped into Sakura's room. He paused and took a quick look around her room. He had never had the luxury of ever being in it before. What he could see in the gloomy light was a surprisingly messy room. The shelves and desk covered with open scrolls and notes, while the floor was littered with random medicinal books. Sakura cursed to herself that she had decided not to clean up her room this morning. Naruto decided that it was a bit rude to look around someone's room without permission, so he carefully maneuvered his way around the mess on the floor to her bed. The bed was nothing really special, apart from the quilt and pillows being a bright pink. Naruto smirked as he pulled back the covers. As much as Sakura acted violent and loud with everyone, she was still a girly girl. Naruto lay the pretending to sleep Sakura as carefully as he could on her bed, propping her head up slowly on her pillow. He then proceeded to draw the quilt up her neck, tucking her into bed. Sakura was somewhere between feeling like she was in heaven and feeling incredibly embarrassed. She hadn't had anyone do this for her in a long time. She had stopped her parents doing it long ago since she said it wasn't befitting of someone trying to become a ninja. However, it did feel amazing having someone be so gentle and caring with her. She had never expected Naruto to be able to show so much care, but her surprises weren't over for tonight just yet. As Naruto stood up and went to leave through the window, he stopped, staring at the peaceful face of the girl he had been in love with for years. His heart ached as he thought about all the things he wanted to tell her but couldn't, because he knew their friendship would be as good as over if he did. He couldn't stand it though, not saying anything. He decided that if he couldn't say it to her when she was awake, that he would say it to her while she was asleep. He wouldn't get many chances like this again. Sakura could feel Naruto standing next to her still and hear his soft breathing. What's he doing? Thought Sakura, fighting the urge to open her eyes. Is he looking at me? Sakura nearly jumped as Naruto spoke softly and quietly next to her. I'm sorry I can't say this to you while you're awake, but the risk is too great. Naruto whispered. He took a deep breath, wondering why it took this much courage to say this to someone who was asleep and couldn't hear him. I'm not sure if anyone's told you this before, but you were incredibly, amazingly beautiful. Not just on the outside, but on the inside too. You only thought of making me feel better when it should have been the other way around. Thank you. And with that, he lowered his head and kissed Sakura gently on the forehead, just as Sakura had done to him when their position had been reversed. Naruto blushed heavily and quickly moved away to the window. He jumped outside, closing the curtains and then window behind him. He breathed out, feeling better after confessing a bit of how he felt to Sakura, albeit with her being asleep. Back in her room, Sakura had her eyes opened wide and was blushing like a maniac. It had taken all of her self-control to not react as Naruto said those wonderful things to her and then kissed her on the forehead. Her heart had gone into overdrive and was still beating ferociously now. Where the hell did that come from? She thought, trying to calm down. I know that he had a sort of crush on me back when we were a full Team 7, but does he really think what he said? And what does he mean? The risk is too great. Despite her confusion, Sakura was practically radiating happiness. She had never thought of herself as exceptionally pretty before. The fact that someone had called her amazingly beautiful made her feel indeed amazing. Needless to say, with all the emotions and confusion running around in Sakura's mind, it took a long time for her to fall asleep. In a small dark cave somewhere in the Fire Country, an incredibly thin, red-headed man who was strapped into a large machine coughed slightly. Behind him 6 similar figures all with bright orange hair were laying on the ground next to each other, apparently asleep. A slim, purple-haired young woman approached the thin man. Nagato, are you okay? She asked tentatively. The man slowly waved a hand in dismissal. I'm fine, Conan, don't worry about me so much. Focus instead on the preparations. The man's purple, ripple-patterned eyes glowed slightly. Tomorrow we will invade Konoha.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.